The story began on a late night on a high mountain range. Along the trails were silhouettes of people holding torches searching for something. It seemed that after a month of hardship in the heavenly Kan region of Xinjiang, a young man was overjoyed because he had obtained what he needed in his hands. Van Hai saw that there were many strange ancient characters on it, so he believed it was genuine. Nearly 600 years ago, the Sword Immortal had left behind an ancient secret manual called Sword God. Van Hai truly wanted to possess that thing, but it would be meaningless to have the manual while his Danshin was severely damaged. If other martial sects discovered it, they would take notice and want to steal it. Therefore, he decided to hide it. Van Hai trembled as he brought the bamboo tube containing the ancient manual to his mouth. After feeling a bit of difficulty, he regretted not bringing water with him. At that moment, someone appeared. "There you are. Hey you, spy of the blood sect, you have found the manual, haven't you?" That person was Mao Dong-tu speaking. Van Hai pretended to say that he had indeed found it, but had hidden it safely, and if he kept his promise, then he would hand it over. Yi Huang stroked his beard thoughtfully and replied, "That promise? Huh, I heard about it when I came here. You want me to remove the frozen blood from your chest, right?" Dong-tu drew out the words, "Indeed I did promise that. But why should I keep such a promise?" He thought that after leaving the blood sect, the young man had nowhere to go. He recited Van Hai's title mockingly, "Ik Duong Chiu family, Chiu Van Hai." A crack from his past was pulled back again. It turned out that Van Hai had been expelled from the sect because his Danshin had been destroyed. And 10 years ago, he had been kidnapped by the blood sect and implanted with blood essence in his chest. Since then, to the blood sect, Van Hai was nothing more than a puppet. Therefore, he thought that even if the young man wanted to regain his freedom, there would be nowhere to go. Mao Dong-tu raised his voice even higher, "Am I wrong, Chiu Van Hai?" The young man did not expect him to know everything about himself and hesitantly asked, "What do you gain by saying all this to me?" He only coldly demanded that Van Hai hand over the Sword God manual. Dong-tu promised that if he obediently handed it over, he would consider removing the blood essence. Though he lowered his head, his eyes were cold as ice when mentioning the manual. He said that he had hidden it in a place that only he himself knew. Van Hai calmly asked, "You also know my situation, right? I did not do this to seek any privilege from your sect." Dong-tu fell silent for a few seconds after hearing that. Next, Van Hai added that he only wanted to leave the blood sect and live a normal life. So if Van Hai was freed from the blood essence first, then after that he would have the manual. At that moment, Yi Huang suddenly laughed darkly. The old man could not help but praise, "You are truly clever." Then the young man's face suddenly turned pale quickly. In an instant, Van Hai was pierced straight through the heart by a sword. Mao Dong-tu spoke in a tone of disgust, "I knew it. This is the kind of place a third-class spy like you would hide things. I bet you hid it inside your body." At that moment, Van Hai finally understood that they had planned to kill him from the very beginning. When the sword was pulled out, his whole body trembled in pain. Dong-tu indifferently told him not to hold hatred toward them. He said that from the moment Chiu Van Hai became a spy, fate had already decided that he would have such an ending. In Van Hai's mind was only hatred. Damn it, why must my miserable life end like this? At that time, Dong-tu was preparing another finishing blow. His sword was so fast that it left only a streak of light. Van Hai was already unconscious. The small bamboo tube had been cut in half. Dong-tu was furious because the manual was inside his body. At that very moment, he saw bright blue streams of energy. He did not know why Chiu Van Hai's body suddenly ignited with azure flames. But the temperature was not hot, so he did not know whether it was real or illusion. Yet Van Hai thought, what use is it anyway? Unless something called the next life exists. He wished that it would not be as pitiful as this life. Without knowing what had happened, suddenly, from somewhere, Van Hai was splashed with water on his face. When he instinctively sat up, he became the subject of ridicule. After fumbling for a while, Van Hai discovered that his body had no cuts or signs of burns. When he heard someone say he looked pathetic, his heart suddenly trembled. It was the infamous blood sect twin brothers, Toabok and Vuhayan. At first, he was a bit surprised because they looked young, but afterward, Van Hai became more suspicious about the fact that he was still alive. Hearing his cry, they did not understand why Van Hai looked so astonished. He stared carefully at his own face and confirmed that this was his body when he was young. Tong Toabok conveniently found an excuse to kick him once. "You crazy drunk, still drunk huh? Get sober and pay us our betting money." Van Hai felt his whole body ache terribly, and it seemed that if he could feel pain, it meant this was not a dream. Then, he quickly sat up. Van Hai grabbed Toabok's collar because he wanted to ask what day it was. While the two were arguing, Vuhayan answered, "The year of Jayap Tuat, month of Kai Dao, the 9th day." In his head, Van Hai began to calculate, if today truly was that day, then this was exactly 10 years before my death. Vuhayan suspiciously asked, "If not, then what year is it? Did you drink too much and turn stupid?" Though being scolded, Van Hai laughed loudly in joy. He could not help but exclaim, "Toabok, I'm so happy to see you." But he also doubted whether it was really 10 years ago, because if it was true, then... The scene shifted to a night when stars flickered across the dark sky. At that time, 2 guests arrived at the tavern door. The waiter was quite surprised because it was late, yet there were still customers. However, before he could finish speaking, the customer had already given him a valuable reward. At that moment, another employee in the inn stepped out to see what was going on. He was shocked when he saw a horrifying scene. Returning to this side, Van Hai felt angry at himself for not arranging things earlier. Toabok beside him from start to finish only cared about demanding money, so Van Hai reminded him, "If you don't want to die, get out of here quickly." The man angrily replied, "You're getting too arrogant. Do you want me to teach you a lesson?" Right at that moment, Van Hai found something important. It was the only keepsake his mother had left behind, the sword Tiu Dam. Van Hai deeply regretted losing it in his previous life, even though he was in a hurry to escape. This time he had to carry it no matter what. A piercing scream suddenly came from somewhere. Van Hai did not know what had happened, but his ears were about to burst. The screams for help made them more alert. The twin brothers Vuhayan and Toabok both guessed that the sound came from outside. But Van Hai thought that if it came from outside, it would be far too loud. He knew now was not the time to argue. The scream meant that it had begun. The twins were still in confusion. At that time, Van Hai separated the two to observe better. As soon as the door opened, the wailing sound came again. He probably had confirmed that it was done by the blood sect. On the 9th day of the month Kai Dao of the year Jayap Tuat, that was the day the blood sect had kidnapped him. Seeing the twins ask about the situation, he said it was the blood sect. Then, Van Hai urged them to run immediately to save their lives, but Toabok doubted that his reasoning was wrong because clearly the blood sect had been defeated by the martial world. Van Hai lost patience and shouted, "Why don't you go ask them yourself? I have to run. Do whatever you want." Then, the man began discussing the escape plan with Vuhayan. On this side, Van Hai knew it was not the time to worry about the twins, because when they were kidnapped, they would later become martial masters. As long as he survived and escaped from the inn, that was enough. But now, thinking back, Van Hai suddenly remembered someone who always called him young master. Van Hai felt stupid for forgetting a Tong, because that boy was the only one who always stood by his side in the Ike Duongqiu family. Van Hai could not abandon the one he considered a brother. Immediately, his voice shouted loudly, "A Tong, wake up quickly!" The boy gasped in surprise when he was shaken awake. Van Hai grabbed the boy's hand again and said, "We must quickly get out of here." A Tong was still confused and did not understand, so Van Hai had to say quickly that he would know after they escaped. Van Hai reported that they were being attacked by the blood sect. They would soon get inside the inn. A Tong inwardly also thought the blood sect had been eliminated. Afterwards, Van Hai refused the exit that the boy pointed out. Because the entire town had been surrounded, If they went out, they would be captured. Atong then suggested returning to the room and hiding in the wardrobe. That idea seemed obvious to anyone. The blood sect did not come to steal wealth, but to abduct people like them. They would search all the places people hid. For example, a wardrobe is the simplest place. Or inside a large wine jar, they would find them immediately. Atong kept mentioning ominous things like being killed, so Van Hai had to stop him. Next, Van Hai said they had to hide in a place no one would think anyone would hide. In a place that, even if thought of, no one would hide there. Moonlight shone down as if everything were peaceful. When Atong asked if it was in this place, Van Hai affirmed, "It is here." He said this was a place no one would suspect someone hiding. From above, one could see the pit giving off a smell. Atong felt annoyed because he did not want to hide in a latrine, but Van Hai paid him no mind. He pushed the boy in and said, "I'll let you hide in one building alone. You can thank me later." Finally, only Atong's helpless echo was heard, "Wait, don't push me." Van Hai thought that even the blood sect would not search that place. He had planned to hide there, but now had no other choice. He knew he needed to find another place before those people arrived. After seeing the stable, Van Hai knew he was not going to die that early. A horse suddenly bolted out of the stable. The pile of straw in front of the stable was hiding a secret. Van Hai thought hiding there was not bad because if the horse was lost, then one would go look for the horse, who would go search the straw. Then he thought if it were first-class spies they would sniff it out, so it was best to hold a weapon. At that moment, the sword in his hand made a sound. "Filthy, you battered bastard, don't use those wet hands to grab me. You think what sound is other than me? Wipe your hands. You think my words are nothing because I am a short sword, huh?" In his heart he thought the sword was possessed. A voice suddenly shouted, "What spirit possesses you? Do you mean my sound is from possession? I am the sword to you, damn, your mother's keepsake here. And you understand my words, human with a sword?" Then Tiu Dam transformed into a white-haired woman. She anxiously asked, "If you can hear, then do you see the sword's incarnation?" Van Hai stared at her. "What is this? Am I hallucinating?" Some doubts in his head made Tiu Dam disgusted. Then Tiu Dam explained that she knew he could hear and see her, and swords could also read the thoughts of those who had touched them. Before they could investigate further, the two heard movement. Van Hai quickly told her to be quiet because someone was coming. But actually it did not matter because only he could hear her speak. Van Hai had in fact asked Tiu Dam to be quiet to concentrate. Some stranger approaching was looking around. Their instincts told him to be more alert. Moreover, the footprints on the ground were worth examining. He had noticed the distant stable. Van Hai on this side was careful and already had a weapon ready in his hand. A dark shadow had fallen over the haymow where he hid. Tiu Dam suddenly wanted to ask Van Hai whether he dared to stab him for real. She thought the power gap was too large and wondered if Van Hai had the guts. At that time, a voice spoke, "Listen to how loudly your heart beats. You're really scared now, aren't you?" That person's hand began to move closer. The nervousness in Van Hai rose. The painful fatal stab by Mao Dong too still seemed vivid. Now that person's hand was almost within reach of him. Van Hai widened his eyes as if he had seized the opportunity. The dry grass was thrown into the air. Van Hai suddenly leapt out from inside and stabbed him. Unable to counterattack in time, that person's pupil instantly shrank and was finished by him. Van Hai also said coldly, "Scared now? Huh, no, I'm very excited. Look up and see, I will survive this life at any cost. Life at any cost. Life at any..." Tiu Dam could not help but praise his bravery. She thought Van Hai was just a fool who liked drinking all year round, but it seemed she had misjudged him. Seeing her rambling non-stop, Van Hai scolded, "You are making my head explode. Be quiet for a bit." Tiu Dam pouted, saying she had only spoken a little. Van Hai thought he would ignore her for now, but of course, Tiu Dam heard everything. Van Hai believed the situation was getting much worse. According to the blood sect's military tactics, when performing missions, their warriors would split into groups of 3. He knew the comrades of this one would come sooner or later. Van Hai had hidden the body here, but they would soon find it. If caught in this condition, he would be killed immediately. So he thought he must finish everything before escaping. Hearing Tiu Dam call him, he grew irritated, thinking she would not let him think in peace. It turned out Tiu Dam wanted that too, but she saw another blood sect member behind him, so she had to warn him. Instantly, Van Hai turned sharply around as she said. The opponent spoke in a cold voice. Did I interrupt you? No matter, just continue, don't mind me. A tall, thin figure was leaning against the nearby door. Van Hai and Tiu Dam froze before him. He leisurely continued, I'm admiring your work. Aren't you going to continue? Van Hai could not sense when he had arrived. Moreover, that belt. The dark brown belt meant he was a mid-level warrior. Van Hai blamed himself for not reacting faster, because now he had no chance of winning. Tiu Dam became excited. A fight's coming. Should I help you a bit? Show him the power of a short sword. The man now slowly walked toward him. You don't know your own limits, do you? You don't look skilled in martial arts. Even if it was a sneak attack, I must praise you for taking down a low-level warrior. He guessed Van Hai was at the early middle level. Therefore, he granted him mercy. If you surrender, you may live. Van Hai decided to provoke him. If you plan to kill me, why talk about ranks? You want to capture me, but are afraid of dying like that one, right? Tiu Dam panicked, thinking Van Hai was insane to provoke the enemy. But Van Hai thought just as expected. The man only pretended to be arrogant. A little provocation, and he lost focus immediately. The warrior laughed. This brat, did you eat tiger's liver? Smart enough. Killing you would be a waste. Seeing how cautious he was, Van Hai stayed alert. The man drew his sword directly. Looks like you're trying to avoid fighting. Huh. Then he curved his blade. So let me see. Is your skill as sharp as your mouth? Van Hai thought that though he was a third-class spy and his dantian was destroyed, he could still see through him. Instantly, the arm holding the sword was restrained. Or rather, it was Van Hai's arm, too slow. It was as if an explosion went off in his head. The man respected Van Hai's observation, but despised his speed. Van Hai was lifted off the ground. After disarming him, the man said, that last strike was quite sharp. Pretend I didn't see you kill that low-level one. Quietly follow me. The sword fell backward, and Van Hai caught it again. A slash quickly swept across at him. Van Hai shouted firmly, no way. Just when he thought it was over, something unexpected happened. Clearly he had made a fatal strike, yet the enemy dodged. The cut left a mark across his eye, driving him mad. The warrior spun his leg and kicked Van Hai. He could not avoid gagging from the internal injury. Van Hai dragged his body across the ground, then rolled several times. He questioned himself whether he had been careless, never expecting the man to dodge at that range. Then he wiped the blood from his mouth. Van Hai knew he had no choice but to stand and fight. Tiu Dam appeared and said, let me help you. I'm telling you, without me you can't win. But he knew at this point nothing else could be done. She asked worriedly, stubborn to the end, what will you do now? Van Hai thought though he hadn't cut deep, the man's eye could barely see, so he would keep aiming for it. The blood sect warrior grew furious, believing he had been merciful. Yet Van Hai was ungrateful, truly a fool wanting death. He drew his sword again, intending to warn him and then take him to the blood sect. But I've changed my mind. I'll end you right here. I'll cut you into hundreds of pieces. Seeing those sharp slashes, Van Hai was terrified. The man swung his sword repeatedly toward him. As he dodged, Van Hai recognized it as the blood sect's basic blood sword technique. But the man was too fast, leaving no time to read his moves. Moreover, the warrior aimed every strike to kill. While swinging his sword, he demanded, now do you know what you've done? Van Hai thought in despair, is he really going to kill me completely? The warrior thought it was too late for repentance. He bent one knee, ready to finish him. Around Van Hai, lightning and sword aura surrounded him. He was slowly falling into despair. He's using all his means. What should I do? Should I just close my eyes and accept death? At that moment, Tu Dam whispered, "It's a frontal strike." Van Hai immediately raised his sword before his face, blocking the attack. The man suddenly froze, shocked. After the warrior fell, Van Hai pushed his body back. Even he did not expect to block that strike. Tu Dam cried out excitedly, "Well done, you actually blocked it. If not for me, you'd be dead." He then realized it was because she told him the attack pattern. Tu Dam irritably explained, "I told you I can see. The feints of a third-class swordsman like him are too easy to read. So what do you want now? Should I keep talking or stay silent?" Van Hai shyly apologized for ignoring her earlier, then asked for her help. She had been patient, waiting for this moment, since she could not just watch the one who could talk to her be killed. When she asked what he would do after reading his opponent, Van Hai did not know, as his current strength was not enough. The enemy had seen him counter once, so he would never fight close again. Van Hai asserted the man would keep his distance. Tu Dam said if they made the enemy impatient, there would be a chance. Meanwhile, the warrior stood in disbelief, still shocked that Van Hai had blocked his strike. He feared Van Hai had seen through his sword style, though that was impossible. Then the warrior again demanded Van Hai's life. Tu Dam instructed Van Hai to block the attacks first to buy time, and he was ready. She tracked all the enemy's movements, calmly reciting, left shoulder, then guard, then right arm. The man screamed unconsciously, "Impossible, how can he block them all?" Right then, he felt blood. His vision seemed covered. Tu Dam told him if he struck the blind spot, the enemy would lose patience. The counterattacks to the blind spot had low accuracy but quick retaliation. She was sure he would turn sideways and be a beat late. When he felt ambushed, he raised his hand. But Van Hai ducked low. He was signal, now. The warrior stammered in shock. How could he? That's what you wanted to hear when I'm stunned, right? Then he launched a knee strike. Van Hai managed to block it with his hand, but the impact was not light. He was knocked back several meters. His arm throbbed painfully, making him almost kneel. The man laughed triumphantly, thinking Van Hai's arm was about to break. Then he twisted his foot. "Not bad knowing my blind spot, but that's all." He leapt up like a tiger pouncing on prey. Van Hai's whole body tensed and trembled. His right arm hung weakly by his leg, but quickly he clenched his fist. Van Hai shouted excitedly, "Now's the time." The warrior swung his sword down, and Van Hai spun like a whirlwind. The man could not comprehend what had happened. Only a sharp cut flashed beneath his neck. The one who delivered that slash was none other than Chiu Van Hai. Fresh blood sprayed out like a great wave. Van Hai cried out, "I did it, I cut him." Afterward, a gentle voice asked, "Are you all right? Can you stand?" He replied, "Yes, I'm fine." Tu Dam praised him while trembling from excitement. Van Hai admitted it was close. She cheerfully described the elegant spin just now, while he modestly said it was thanks to her guidance. Tu Dam suddenly became wary. "Though I'm a short sword," he interrupted immediately. "Why are you sulking?" She retorted that she was just surprised, then told Van Hai to clean the sword's blade. Though he tried to show care, she said she wasn't angry, but still nagged, "Remember to clean the scabbard too. It's your mother's keepsake. You're too careless." Suddenly, Tu Dam shouted. Chiu Van Hai ducked down. But before he could react, an extremely powerful force struck straight down on his head. Moreover, that person's hand still burned with energy. Van Hai's face was twisted from the blow, and the one who struck was Captain Ho. He said in a deep voice, "Ridiculous. They didn't come back for so long. I went to check, and you two got killed by a snot-nosed brat." Van Hai lay flat on the ground, blood spreading out beneath him. The tag on his body was engraved with the following words, Ik Duong City, Juat Lang District, Chiu Van Hai. It was also a hint referring to the notorious playboy of Hunan. People called him the useless man of Juat Lang District, regarded by his clan as a discarded waste after his dantian was destroyed. That man also added that he was the son of an Orthodox family, should they bring him back to train as a spy or not. Captain Ho thought that one should not nurture a person without a danshan, because he would not endure the training and would die. Moreover, in the current situation, even if he was the son of a noble family, but now like this, he did not think Van Hai could accomplish anything. Finally, the captain ordered, "He is not even worthy of the lowest rank, execute him." Van Hai trembled and cried out, begging, "Please do not kill me, I will become a spy or anything you want." In the end, he even put his hands together, begging for his life. That was what he thought. Van Hai had twisted and turned trying to avoid this situation, but it still happened. Yet this time both his hands were tied. After that he asked Tu Dam about the time, but it seemed she could not answer him. Van Hai thought that was because Tu Dam was not in his hand, so she was like that. At that time, the words were different from the previous life. Compared to a man whose danshan was destroyed, it was impressive. When you used this broken dagger to kill my 2 subordinates. Indeed, even losing your danshan, you are still the son of a noble family. In his mind he began to calculate. He valued me more than in the previous life. They are very pragmatic. So if it keeps going like this, then they will take me with them, right? Calm down. You will just end up the same way as before. He thought that he should think positively, must try to survive and find a chance to escape. That man coldly ordered, "Then I will handle him here." Van Hai was stunned for a moment. On this side, he admitted that the boy could become a spy, but outside there were many with danshan, more worthy to be trained as agents. So he thought there was no need for a useless one and ordered to finish him. Van Hai thought that even if the evaluation had changed, the result was still the same. Knowing there was no other choice, he had to beg just like before. Captain Ho sneered, "You stared at me the whole time and now you beg for mercy. Stop this cowardly act and pay for killing my men." Just as Van Hai was still cursing, the man raised his sword. The target was probably the middle of his neck. Van Hai felt despair because he thought he could not escape. Then he quickly urged himself to find a way to buy time, because Van Hai did not want to die sooner than in the previous life. At that moment, a burst of laughter rang out. The leader spoke again, "The scene of you struggling for life is impressive. Why not kneel and beg like a dog again?" Van Hai was focusing on a sword. While he was demanding to make him a pet, Van Hai suddenly remembered having seen that weapon before. A sword with white leather fittings on the hilt. He remembered clearly it must be that person. Van Hai immediately bowed his head and shouted, "Blood demon greets the blood that rules the world." The subordinates stirred and whispered in confusion. They did not understand why he was referring to the 4 blood stars. Captain Ho was still unaware. What is all that noise? There is no way someone like the 4 blood stars would be here. But clearly the fiery aura spreading out made him frightened. Under such terrifying pressure, he had to exclaim, "Salute to the 4 blood stars." Then Captain Ho and his subordinates knelt down. Van Hai was recalling that the blood sect was managed by 11 leaders, among them 4 venerable ones and 7 blood stars. However, he had never met them in the previous life. But he had heard rumors about their blood stars. They were those who often disguised themselves as low-level swordsmen, blending into the ranks to supervise the subordinates. At that time, Van Hai heard an order, "Lift your head." Truong Hao spoke casually, "Interesting. No one has ever discovered my identity when I infiltrate." And this person was indeed the 4th blood star, Dao Truong Hao. He was curious how the boy recognized him, especially since the boy was not a member of the sect. Van Hai hinted that it was because of his sword, because of the fittings and leather sheath around the hilt. He knew it was made in memory of his white fragrant horse. Truong Hao quickly uttered a sound of amazement. He lowered himself facing Van Hai, sharp indeed, by the way. How does someone not of the blood sect know about this? Van Hai knew he was being suspected. In this situation, not suspecting would be strange. But in the previous life, he had hidden as a spy for 7 years, had experienced this hundreds of times. Van Hai quickly showed his talent for fabrication. That was because this humble one carries the bloodline of the blood sect. Hearing that, Captain Ho was the first to be shocked. The subordinates were also agitated by that statement. Chuang Hao half doubted and waited to hear more. So he continued, "My maternal grandfather joined the wars as a low-rank warrior of Blood Wolf Dai. After being injured, he left the battle and wandered seeking a home for his only daughter. And thus, my grandfather settled in Juatlang district. Although it was difficult to find a place to hide from the wars, but his wounds grew worse and worse. Van Hai said that to buy medicine, his mother worked as a servant for the Chiu family of Ikduong. Later, she met my father and fell in love, and I was born." Truong Hao softly repeated the story. He touched the sword and told him to continue. Van Hai knew it was not enough, so he added that since childhood his grandfather had trained him hard. Whenever Van Hai complained about the hardship, he would mention Lord Blood Wolf Lo Chiu Van and his son Lo Fan Ku. Van Hai began to mimic his grandfather's voice. The Lord's son had finished all his training when he was your age. The subordinates were shocked because he knew the names of the two lords. Van Hai sadly said, "Every day my grandfather would say that one day the blood sect would find its descendants. Even on his deathbed he spoke of the blood sect." Truong Hao gazed at him silently for a while. Then, as if he understood, "If that was true then, for someone whose Danshin was destroyed to kill two of my members was understandable." As he was about to speak further, Captain Ho shouted. He told him not to listen to Van Hai. The subordinate did not know where he heard those things, but Blood Wolf Daimon had. The sharp sound silenced him. "Fifth Commander, who allowed you to interfere in my matter? It seems that just being a commander makes you think you can meddle in the business of a blood star, right?" Immediately, he knelt down and said, "Forgive me, I beg your pardon." Van Hai had his own feeling, making a commander tremble at just a few words and glances. This was the authority of a blood star. Truong Hao now softened his tone, "Sorry for the interruption. But there is something strange. I think although your righteous act caused losses to the blood sect, why did you not reveal your identity to the fifth commander but beg for your life instead?" Van Hai stammered an explanation that he feared punishment if he spoke, if they knew his identity and that he killed two men. He was cautious with such a sharp man. His words were half true, half false, hard to read. But Truong Hao did not get carried away and still pressed into the inconsistency. Then his arms slowly relaxed. Truong Hao suddenly burst into laughter that no one understood. Van Hai stayed silent, waiting for his next move. Truong Hao finally said that he had joked too much, so let's just take things that way. If your grandfather was a former member, then you can also be regarded as a brother in the blood sect. Hearing that, he finally relaxed. He felt relieved because he almost lost a precious heir of the orthodox line. So Dao Truong Hao allowed him to join, considering it the continuation of his grandfather's legacy. Van Hai then bowed respectfully. "It is truly an honor for this humble one, great fourth blood star. My grandfather can now rest in peace." In his heart he concluded. Somehow he had preserved his life, but still had to join the blood sect. The rope on his hands had also been loosened. Now Van Hai could perform the ceremony properly. Blood demon descends, cleanses the blood of the world. Truong Hao only left one sentence, "Welcome you back to the sect." In Van Hai's heart, however, he was thinking differently. Although he survived but was captured by the blood sect, knowing that he would be taken back, he might as well have been captured immediately. At that moment, someone else came to him. "All right. Finding back a descendant is also a kind of fate. I will listen to your wish." Van Hai could only think of a question filled with doubt, because Dao Truong Hao told him to speak out his wish, but inside it could just be a test to probe his reaction. Since he did not understand clearly, Van Hai had to give a very reasonable request, and what he asked for was to have back the sword relic of his mother. He was also surprised when Van Hai called it a relic. When ordered to bring it out, Captain Ho hesitated because that sword had been stained with the blood of subordinates. In contrast, Truong Hao just said coldly, "Do not make me repeat myself." so he had to offer it with both hands. He saw that the sword was a bit old, but still a good weapon. Then Truong Hao paused again. But you must pay the price for spilling the blood of our sect members, right? Next time when you raise the blade, I think you should be more careful. Truong Hao coldly threw it back. Even though the sword fell to the ground, Van Hai did not hurry to pick it up. Because he saw that he had made Tiu Dam tremble, a sign of someone with profound inner power, and also a warning. There was no doubt anymore. Van Hai knew he had survived. Then, Truong Hao ordered him to stand up. Van Hai quickly replied, I will pick up the sword and leave immediately. He thought as long as he could get the sword, it was fine. But clearly, Tiu Dam was very angry because that was her beautiful hair. He had to comfort her saying he would find a craftsman to fix it later. Tiu Dam did not forget to scold. If I could move by myself, I would definitely shave his head, and of course Van Hai also wanted to see that. After that, she asked whether his blood sect bloodline was true or false. To this girl, Van Hai frankly said that the story was not true, but also not false. If it was Tiu Dam, he would tell everything. Tiu Dam was very worried when she saw that seriousness. So, Van Hai asked, if I say I come from the future 10 years later, would you believe it? Hearing that, Tiu Dam's face clearly showed confusion. At that moment, something else was happening elsewhere. Truong Hao had secretly ordered an investigation into his family. Captain Ho hesitated to ask, do you mean even the fourth blood star also? He nodded. That's right. Actually, whether he spoke truth or not did not matter. But he observed every small gesture and movement of mine. He grasped the intention of this seat like a professional spy. Whatever he is, he knows too much already. We should keep an eye on him. So, Captain Ho obeyed the order. On the carriage, Tiu Dam said she would summarize the information. She tried to remember. You have lived under the identity of a spy for 10 years. After dying unjustly, you were reborn here, right? You returned 10 years before your death. After that I could talk with you, right? No wonder I found you not as stupid as the Van Hai I knew. She thought Van Hai was really unlucky. After so much hardship he was kidnapped again. When Tiu Dam mentioned leaving a Tong behind, he immediately rejected it. Because a Tong was the only one who treated Van Hai like a human being. His voice became lower. Moreover, in the previous life a Tong died to protect me. That was the debt of gratitude in my heart when I was in the blood sect. Today I have repaid it. When he knew everything had passed, Van Hai thought about his next life. However, Tiu Dam thought he would be deceived again like 10 years ago. She firmly said, Chiu Van Hai, information is a weapon. You are holding the best weapon. As a spy you should know that. You know in advance all the misfortunes so you can avoid them, or turn them into good things. Van Hai needed time to digest all her words. Then, he agreed, that's right. Why do I keep worrying about how to survive when I hold the knowledge of the next 10 years? So, Van Hai agreed to make good use of everything. However, Tiu Dam told him to lower his voice a little, making Van Hai have to explain that he was just too excited. Now he understood that he still had many opportunities. Moreover, he might be able to learn martial arts. Tiu Dam was a bit confused because he had his Danshan destroyed, but Van Hai said that was not entirely accurate information. But anyway, he thought he should temporarily ignore that matter. So she looked at him with disdain. Then she hesitated to speak. I mean if you still have inner power, then I will teach you martial arts. It's me, the short sword technique that the previous master once used, except me. No one knows it. He thought learning martial arts from a sword was impossible. Tiu Dam angrily shouted, have you never heard that even a dog guarding the gate for 3 years can recite poetry? I know much more than you. Listen here, now I will recite the formula for you. At that moment, Van Hai's right hand started to shine. He was also astonished by those streams of blue light. Van Hai did not understand what those green flames were. 1 second later, he had fallen into a mysterious space. Van Hai looked around in confusion. Where is this place? Why has it become like this? Moreover, his body looked very strong. Next, a voice came from nowhere. The universe will open for whoever obtains the sword heart. Van Hai also recognized that it was Tu Dam's voice. Then before his eyes appeared bright spinning lights. That strange thing made him a little dazzled. When he came back to his senses, Van Hai had returned to reality. He did not understand what had just happened. Tu Dam angrily scolded, "What is wrong with your head?" I was struggling to recite the formula, and Van Hai was implying that there was something on his hand. It looked like the 7 stars of the Big Dipper. But the girl only saw it as a normal back of the hand, thinking he just made excuses not to study. So Tu Dam disappeared in anger. Only then did Van Hai realize that only he could see that thing. Then he spoke more gently, "Sorry Tu Dam, but are you okay? It took half a month, you know." The sword slightly trembled as if in surprise. But because she was still angry, she coldly said, "Forget it, I am tired." Now Van Hai had time to think about what had just happened. He thought that thing was like the blue flame when he returned. So Van Hai was sure it was related to the mysterious sword manual. Scene shifts to where the convoy is stopping. Inside, he was still thinking, so that thing does not appear anymore. How should I make it appear? After that, Van Hai realized that the carriage had stopped. Someone had opened the door of his wagon. Shouts immediately filled the air. "Get up quickly, you brats. How long are you going to lie there? Stand up and gather out there. Anyone causing trouble will be sent to meet their ancestors." Not seeing the sun for a long time made him a little uncomfortable. The shouting still echoed through the camp. "Hurry your feet. Gather all in the front." Tu Dam yawned and scolded the noisy person. Then Van Hai mentioned a location, the Valley of 6 Bloods. He remembered clearly that it was one of the territories of the Blood sect, also the place to train kidnapped children, which made Tu Dam realize that they all shared the same kidnapped fate. Then Van Hai introduced the man standing on the platform. That was the instructor in charge of training supervision, Ku Fan. At that moment, someone called him, "Hey, you useless brat Hien Juet Lang." Before he could answer, Van Hai was shoved on the shoulder. Toa Bok then teased him, "You acted like you knew everything before yet still got caught here." Seeing them here, he also knew the black and white twin demons had been arranged. However, Toa Bok noticed Van Hai was not tied up. When he heard the story getting longer, he still wanted to listen. At that moment, they were shouted at again, "Stop chatting, pay attention. Do you see the platform behind me? I will count to 5, run up there." Toa Bok was furious because they should have untied him properly too. On the contrary, Van Hai emphasized, "If you are not tired of living, just follow me." The brothers Toa Bok and Hien Vu did not understand what was happening. But before they received a reply, he had already rushed forward. The kidnapped children were still standing and shouting. He complained that the boy should have explained more clearly, then looked after him. At this moment, someone waved a hand to signal. A warrior was silently approaching from behind them, and the twins had agreed to run. 1 second later, red blood splashed out from somewhere. The brutal killing scene made the girl scream. Below began the chase and slaughter. The 2 brothers Hien Vu and Toa Bok had already run quite a distance. However, they were still terrified when they looked back. At this moment, Toa Bok understood that once again everything happened exactly as the boy had said. The 2 brothers also learned the lesson that they must follow whatever Van Hai did. Even if they did not understand, they had to imitate. And he successfully led the 2 of them up to the platform. Seeing this unprecedented event made Fan Ong astonished. Moreover, they knelt without needing instruction. After that, the matter that the 5th leader reported about Van Hai claiming to be a descendant of the Blood sect was also brought up. Tu Dam was very afraid of this, but he thought calling himself that would avoid suspicion later. Also, he knew that if he did not speak, he would be beaten as an example to others. On the high platform, Fan Ong shouted attention. The children below also immediately fell silent. He emphasized that they should be happy to have been chosen. The will of the great blood demon had led them to the loyal Blood sect, but hearing the name Blood sect, the crowd seemed panicked. One stubborn person shouted, "Stop lying. How can you recruit by kidnapping and killing like this? Tu Dam both agreed and feared, while Van Hai knew that person was about to die. While she was still confused, he confirmed again. He said perhaps she did not see because he had run first. On the other side, that man was still threatening to report to the Martial Alliance. Then a red sword light shot out, and that was proof that the blood sect showed no mercy to the weak. Van Hai explained that it was a tactic to shake the tree to scare the monkey, forcing absolute loyalty. The cold voice rose just as he said, "If you want to be like this one, go ahead." Tu Dam wondered how he survived in his previous life. Van Hai thought of it as shame because he had bowed like a dog. At this time, Fan Ung announced the initiation ceremony. He glanced sideways with intention, starting with good. It turned out he was testing whether Van Hai knew what was in the box. When he calmly said it was blood parasite, he was praised. Then Van Hai was ordered to explain about it. His voice was low for a long time. Blood parasite. It is a poisonous worm implanted in the chest of new disciples to remind them not to forget their oath to the blood sect. Every 12 hours, each person must take the sex life pill, otherwise the blood parasite will destroy their chest. Toa Bok trembled and asked him, "How do you know all these things?" Fan Ung was very pleased with the detailed explanation, very worthy of the title loyal descendant. Toa Bok was furious and cursed him, "You damn dog, are you a spy?" Tu Dam wanted to mock, but he stopped her, because this matter was difficult to handle. Then, the man said he would grant him a favor, and that was a chance to show loyalty as a descendant, to receive the blood parasite first. Van Hai was pained because there was no other way, but strangely he received much attention. He thought there was no way back. To survive meant to swallow the blood parasite. He clasped his hands and loudly said, "Thank you, sir, for granting me this blessing." Then the fifth leader heard him ask for more water to swallow easily. That made him jealous. Fan Ung seemed to have goodwill toward that boy, though it was not yet confirmed whether he had blood sect lineage or not. That matter would soon be revealed. Everything was already prepared. Just wait and see. Chiu Van Hai. Now Van Hai was still endlessly thanking Fan Ung, and he also greatly praised that loyalty. Then Fan Ung said, "You all know what to do. Now each one step up here to receive the blood parasite." Tu Dam felt terrified of living with that dreadful insect. He also felt bitterly ironic for having to experience it again. But suddenly, Van Hai's whole body seemed to have something conflicting inside. He felt his chest both painful and burning, as if a blazing fire was raging. She worriedly asked him, "Is your chest having a problem?" Van Hai, of course, did not know, only realized the feeling was very strange. But it was indeed where the blood parasite activated. He understood that this thing would not act without reason. But soon he suspected the fifth leader, the one who had used tricks. Fan Ung was also the one who noticed his abnormality. At that time, someone asked him, "Has the blood parasite in your chest activated?" A person with the bloodline of the sect, writhing in the initiation of the blood parasite. Van Hai was furious. He wanted to find out what that man had done to him. Eagle worriedly asked, "What is it? Is he all right?" He explained that it was because he got agitated when swallowing it, but of course he would not make such a mistake. After that, the fifth commander told him to turn back because he would personally use inner force to make the blood parasite sleep. He urged him to hurry up because many others were still waiting. Van Hai hesitated because he thought it would not be him doing it. At that moment, he felt the pain moving down to his stomach. So when he said he was fine, the fifth commander seemed a little angry. He told him to tense the lower abdomen so he could transmit inner energy. But the strange feeling inside him was spreading. Van Hai was sure it was that thing, so he had to find a way to stop the fifth commander. In a desperate situation, he gave him a fragrant puff. The strong scent passed through the mask. He hesitantly said, "I warned you already, I am fine." The laughter echoed through the mountains and forests, but no one would hear. Because Tu Dam was the owner of the laughter, he felt embarrassed because she kept teasing about the fart incident. She thought it was quite boring here. Having him around to make her laugh was fun, only Van High felt terrible. But she got more excited. What is so bad? Is it because of that fart? He knew clearly it was not that but the blood parasite. His pain had disappeared. His chest felt very comfortable. Right then, Toabok came over and asked, "Blood slave, where are we going now?" He did not like that title, and Tiu Dam also mocked with him. He forgot he also swallowed the blood parasite to survive. During the quarrel, Toabok revealed that he treated his hometown friend badly, wanted to stand out alone, while he thought that was not true. Then the order from above echoed again, "Everyone pay attention here. Now I will assess and classify you. Do not make noise or act on your own." He had some doubt. In the previous life it was someone else. Was it because of what happened earlier? The fifth commander pointed at the stone caves behind. It turned out that each cave had one person from the blood cult. Their talents would be evaluated by them. When the assessment was finished, they would receive rank cards from high, medium to low. They had to try to reach high rank because the blood cult valued only strength. He pointed to the blue belt on his waist, the symbol of high rank. High-rank warriors recognized for their strength and achievements would have the blood parasite removed. He said to strive for recognition, even rewards. The crowd was amazed about the removal of the blood parasite. They were all now aiming for high-rank cards. Van High also noticed their hope, but only he knew they were slowly becoming people of the blood cult. The fifth commander coldly said, "I told you not to make noise." Van High stared at the item in his hand. Then the sound of the whistle grew louder. Seeing him covering his ears tightly, Toabok was a bit puzzled. He did not know whether to imitate or not. Though the whistle was loud, it was not that bad. But a second later, his face darkened. The screams of the entire crowd resounded. Tiu Dam was very worried for him and everyone. Van High explained that the blood parasites would wriggle when the whistle was blown. But strangely, when the whistle blew, he did not feel anything. The people below were writhing on the ground. The fifth leader frowned. "I told you about high-rank warriors because that is procedure. But how many of you think you can achieve it? At most only 2 or 3, and the rest will live with the blood parasite for the rest of their lives." He continued shouting, "How long do you plan to lie down? Stand up." During that time, Van High thought the blood parasite might no longer be inside him. Seeing Tiu Dam about to speak, he immediately understood and replied, "Even if you cover your ears, it will not stop the parasite from wriggling." He wished his elixir field was not destroyed so he could use inner force to check. Toabok said in a low tone, "I have decided, since I swallowed the parasite, there is no way back. No matter how talented you are, I am better at martial arts than someone without an elixir field." He declared that he would soon get high rank, remove the parasite and take revenge, surprising him. The fifth commander was about to speak when a hand was raised. Toabok volunteered to be the first to take the challenge. Tiu Dam thought he was sulking because Van High had hidden everything. After the request was accepted, Toabok rushed forward. He thought he did not need help. He would prove he was better himself. Right then a punch hit his face. Toabok immediately fell down hard. He was angry because it had been announced not to act on their own. They were only to move when ordered, and to answer when superiors gave orders only. The crowd looked at Toabok as a lesson in stupidity. Van High quickly followed along respectfully. The fifth commander directly pointed at him as the first to join the trial. Instinctively he said, "Me," because he knew that the man ultimately wanted to make things hard for him. He then mocked him. "What is it? Does the descendant of the blood cult have a problem with that?" Immediately, Van High replied, "No sir, I only appreciate your care," but inside, he already accepted that this life would not be easy. Van High stepped slowly into the cave. The fifth commander continued ordering the others to line up. This trial, though it was the second time, still felt new. Tiu Dam was quite worried because he had no elixir field, and asked about his previous result. Of course the answer was the lowest, and such people were only pawns for miscellaneous tasks. Suddenly, someone appeared. "Are you Van High from Loyang City?" He felt a bit wary, if he was not mistaken. This voice was, so he arranged this. He looked a bit younger, but he was sure it was him. Van High knew every detail about this man. He was his direct superior in the previous life. Tu Dam curiously asked which team he was in. The answer was Blood Wolf. And of course, the man in front of him was the captain of the Blood Wolf team, the name he had mentioned. Luo Tingjiu patiently asked him, "Why do you not answer?" "I asked if you are Chiu Van Hai from Loyang City." He found the plan of Commander Hu very clever, but unfortunately he had fooled even the Blood Star. So deceiving someone he already knew in the past life was even easier. He immediately said, "Captain of the Blood Wolf team, my grandfather told me a lot about you." Tingjiu coldly drew his sword. "What a bad lie. You said your grandfather was a warrior of the Blood Wolf team. There is no warrior in the Blood Wolf team who could be your grandfather. Tell me who you really are. Tell me who you..." By reflex, Van High jerked backward because he was startled. But Tin Ku lunged forward and grabbed his throat. He spoke with murderous intent. "You want to die? You say your grandfather served under my father. I have trained in the Blood Wolf troop since I first had thoughts. I remember all the soldiers under command." Tu Dam anxiously said he should draw his sword, but he knew that would make things worse, so he had to choose words to deal with it. At that moment, Tu Dam warned from below him. Van High took a full chin punch from him. What he could do was try his best to withstand it. But the feeling of ribs shattering was truly too painful. He did not expect him to be that fast. If he could not resolve it by talking. But one thing to note was that his body could not endure for long. After that, Van High was directly kicked onto a rock. Fresh blood spurted non-stop. Tu Dam was trying to encourage him. And Van High also acknowledged this violent personality was just like in the previous life. He tried to act like he was fine, but he also knew the last blow was not a mere move. Tu Dam told him to prepare because Tin Ku was about to rush in. But he felt dizzy and had trouble concentrating. She then discovered his back was wounded. So Tu Dam guided him how to move. First was a horizontal slash toward the neck from the right. She urged him to block the blow. Van High drew in and assumed a guarding stance immediately. But the force that hit him still knocked him down. Seeing that strange reaction, Tin Ku was a bit puzzled. Meanwhile, he was talking with Tu Dam but realized she had flown off somewhere. Then he quickly scanned with his eyes. Yet Tin Ku used his foot to stomp straight onto Van High's body. He ordered coldly, "Answer me. Who told you those things about me?" Sensing a good opportunity, Van High asked, "Leader, did you not want to find your younger sister?" Tin Ku grew angrier. "It seems you investigated thoroughly. But you missed one detail. My younger sister is dead." Van High shouted, "Luo the Hoa lady is still alive. On the day your father was killed, she was kidnapped." He quickly hit the focal point. Why was only her body burned? Because that was fake. Your younger sister is still alive. If you want to hear more, make a pact. From afar, Tu Dam lit up as if listening. Tin Ku still spoke in a low voice. "You know her name." He lifted his sword. Then he planted it beside Van High's head as a warning. "It seems you are not bluffing. Consider that I was deceived by you. I will listen to your story. He will decide whether to make a pact after hearing it." Then he asked about the whereabouts of the younger sister. Van High named exactly one place, Full Moon Flower Merchants Guild. He had imprinted that reputation in his heart. But that place was under the jurisdiction of the first seventh star. So who would be the mastermind behind the assassination of his father? Van High quickly spoke into Tin Ku's black heart. "All of it was meant to provoke your hatred and seize control of the Blood Wolf troop. The first Blood Star, Truong Long of the Blood Sect. It was all a plan arranged by him." Tin Ku immediately thought that was absurd, because the wound on his father's corpse was reported as. Before he could finish hearing, Van High cut in, "You saw it with your own eyes. The collection and examination of your father's corpse were handled by one person from the Full Moon Flower Merchants Guild and the Lunar Star Commander, right?" Van High glanced and understood that he was wavering. It was the moment for him to strike. Then Van Hai confidently said, "The young lady is currently in the Golden Sea sub-branch in Zhejiang. There are many ears and eyes there, so send someone trustworthy to investigate." Tinku hesitated for a long time. "You finally?" On the other hand, Van Hai smugly asked, "Is that enough for you to make a pact with me? Please help me once when I need your strength." Tinku did not forget to threaten, "If the story you just told is false, I will come cut your throat." He was not afraid and grabbed his hand. "I have swallowed the blood parasite already. What is there to fear? I hope you soon find your younger sister." Yet Tinku said he still did not fully trust him. But if what he said was true, regardless of a pact, he would regard him as a benefactor for the rest of his life. Van Hai also thanked him for that integrity. His heart could not help but be proud because in the previous life he had also chosen to follow him. But then suddenly, he slightly froze. The thing in his hand surprised him somewhat. For it was the mid-level token. Tinku said it was because he had blocked 2 of his blows, not because of a pact that he gave it to him. At that moment, he turned back to the old matter. "You heard of my lineage from your grandfather?" Van Hai asked whether he wanted to believe it or not. Tinku sheathed his blade and said he would accept that lie. Before he could speak, he fell into thought. "I do not know whether you are clever or foolish. You never mentioned your grandfather's name after I threatened you. You started rambling about that information." In retrospect, he felt the man was right and realized he had been ensnared. Tinku was truly unclear what Van Hai was scheming, but still chose to trust him this time. Tiu Dam now felt very relieved. "I thought something bad would happen when I got knocked away." Tinku watched him quickly leave the cave. He thought Van Hai was relatively skilled, but compared to his youth, it seemed he had lived more than 10 years. Moreover, with his earlier movement, consider the first block as lucky. But the second block, he remembered both of his eyes were shut. Tinku found him too slow to sense his kai, saying it was nearly impossible. But he had the feeling someone was helping him. The more he thought, the more angry he grew. Though a bit disturbed, he felt no hatred for him. Outside, the 5th commanders barked again. "Hurry up, adjust your positions according to your ranks, and the mid-level token will follow me." Toabak was also astonished. "No way, you stable town scoundrel of Loyang. How could you be mid-level like me?" "Be mid-level." The group followed behind the 5th commanders. Toabak still did not forget to complain about the unexpected and unreasonable situation. What made him most angry was that Van Hai had no elixir field but was still mid-level, perhaps because he was a spy. Seeing that temperament, Tiu Dam thought he was too competitive, and he found it extremely annoying because neither of them could fight him. She was a little puzzled what the two were. But later, Tiu Dam said, "I understand now. That Commander Ho is also here. Chiu Van Hai, you remaining unharmed after facing Tinku seems to have struck at his pride. He keeps glancing at you." Van Hai also thought it was understandable that Tinku guaranteeing his safety made him angry. When Tiu Dam called him a fart sniffer, he only hoped she would not mention it again. Next, Tiu Dam asked about his plan. He thought he should find an opportunity to heal his elixir field. Tiu Dam worriedly asked, "You said that before, right? But how will you do it?" Van Hai briefly said there was a way. He told her did she know the name Master Heal. Tiu Dam looked and saw his mind was empty. He explained that it was a doctor known to cure any illness. As long as you paid the right price he would heal. From what Van Hai heard, that doctor had once healed a shattered elixir field. Hearing that in 10 months the person would come by, she knew Van Hai would bargain and get treatment. She was a bit worried because he had left all his money at the inn. He had nothing except her. Thinking Van Hai intended to sell himself, Tiu Dam struck him. Toa Bok suspected his oddness, and he thought of a way to find an herb as payment. He remembered the doctor would need a special herb when he came. She knew he had planned ahead. Van Hai thought that being in the tiger's den he had to find a way to rise in the blood sect. Seeing her mock him for abandoning the orthodox sect, he replied that whether righteous or demonic, they were still only people. Over here, many warriors lay on the ground. Commander Ho quickly ordered them to stop. He looked angrily at the matter. What is this? Who did this? Turning this way, it seemed the culprit still stood there. Enhak Thien angrily cursed. These guys are all trash. Hearing the commotion, he also turned around. His voice light as if nothing. Fresh meat has arrived. The 5 commanders quickly retreated. He did not forget to command everyone to step back. But the arm holding the sword was seized. Enhak Thien bluntly said, interfering too much, get lost. He was immediately dealt with. Then Enhak Thien tossed his hand into the air. The 5 commanders flew away like a leaf. The sword he was proud of also fell to the ground. Van Hai was also greatly terrified because he was defeated with a single move. In his head were only 2 words, gone mad. A master like Commander Ho was reduced to this. Even being a leader could not make him like that. He had never heard of a master of this level in the Valley of 6 Bloods in the past. Wariness rose within him. He was too powerful. Who exactly was he? Seeing Toa Bak accuse him of murder, he only thought it foolish. Enhak Thien placed both hands forward and lightly slapped a few times. But that alone created an air pressure. At that moment, a wave suddenly rolled in. Van Hai felt an indescribable ache. Enhak Thien stood there leisurely as if watching a show. The people below were already writhing. He snorted coldly and said, daring to cause a disturbance with so little ability, are these guys all trash? Over here, Van Hai was reporting the situation to Tiu Dam. My eardrums feel about to tear. I can't even hear the surrounding sounds. Dizzy, really want to vomit. But then, he suddenly calmed because he felt heat in his chest. Tiu Dam looked at him suspiciously. He said the buzzing in his ears had stopped and the wound had healed. But then he heard a shout, damn it, come here. Try to kill me. If you want to touch my brothers, step over my corpse first. It turned out Vu Hui letter 1 EC1N had collapsed, so he was like that. He worriedly looked at his brother Toa Bak. Then came his younger brother. But before such a monster, he only prayed they would faint. Toa Bak looked dumbfounded at Enhak Thien. Then he used his big hand to punch him like a pest control game. Behind him many had been treated the same. Vu Haiyan anxiously ran up to check his brother. Tiu Dam only worried for him, but fortunately he could still move, only not knowing what else would happen. Van Hai's eyes gradually darkened with the cry, still one more. Enhak Thien looked at him with great interest. Tiu Dam urged him to run away from him quickly. As Van Hai just took a step, the man behind lunged. His leg raised 180 degrees, and the main target was the small mouse Van Hai. Apparently, his instinct had sensed it too. Long after, many calls of Commander Ho echoed. It turned out Fan Ung had come to search because it was the appointed time and he was not seen. Looking around, most of their recruits were injured. The superior asked, but he could not remember anything except a name of a berserk savage suddenly going mad. Fan Ung was quite surprised by that. Commander Ho described the opponent who felled him with one strike. The body was large, hair disheveled, wearing tiger skin as clothing. The description of the giant wearing tiger skin made him pause. He did not understand why Fan Ung was thoughtful. He only implied that the person was the one who did it. The following clue was terrible. Gui Thien Elder, one of the 4 current masters. Fan Ung said seriously, yes, you probably do not know because you were dispatched. But recently, he has been active outside the Valley of 6 Bloods. One of the highest authorities, one of the current masters, and the strangest character, the barbarian Gui Thien. And the person being mentioned laughed loudly, unexpectedly. You are seeking this weapon. I heard all the recruits are weak, but you possess this short sword. A person without an elixir field could withstand that move. And you were the first to wake up. He thought everything was truly interesting. The scene shifts to a place of towering mountains. It turns out that there are 2 people crossing the mountains here. Captain Ho kept apologizing. Fan Ung only reminded him that Enhak Thien was someone who could not be touched. He was a bit afraid that he would kill the recruits. They were mid-level cadets who were very hard to replace. He was not sure about Van Hai. But the twin brothers were different. Though even so Fan Ong was not certain. He knew well that the man often came by but never thought he would cause trouble with cadets. After that, he informed that they were almost there, so he must be careful with his words. Because among the 4 leaders, Nhak Thien was the hardest to deal with. When they arrived, Fan Ung had already knelt down and recited the sect slogan, declaring himself the one in charge of the cadets. Seeing no response, he ordered again, "Show respect to the Lord quickly." Inside the cave, strange sounds were coming out. Captain Ho worriedly wanted to go see but was ordered to wait. Because Than Ung knew angering Nhak Thien was useless. Suddenly, a swirl of dust hit him from somewhere. The direction of it started from the cave entrance. More precisely, the object that caused the shockwave was a walnut. Inside, Nhak Thien laughed loudly. "I guess you are quite a capable commander." Than Ung humbly said that he was only an insect compared to him. Next, Nhak Thien asked, "The reason you came here, is it because of these newly captured children?" Than Ung honestly answered, "Yes, sir. They will be raised into warriors of our sect." He was slightly displeased because he thought the man suspected he would harm them. Than Ung had to bow his head to deny that. Nhak Thien laughed even louder, but his intentions were hard to read. He said these children were quite good. He thought he would teach them some moves while they stayed here with him, so do not worry. Hearing that, Than Ung was a bit surprised about the private teaching. Knowing that he had never taken disciples, Than Ung, though awkward, still congratulated him on the good news of taking disciples. But then, Nhak Thien interrupted him, "Do not get it wrong. I only use them to avoid loneliness in this place. You think I would take disciples?" Than Ung hurriedly apologized, and the 5th commander struggled to think, what is he saying, not taking them as disciples? But being taught by a powerful master is already a life-changing experience, and he is one of the 4 greats. He did not want Van Hai to have that chance, so he spoke up to talk to Nhak Thien. The 5th commander told the story that Van Hai's elixir field had been destroyed. Of course, that made Than Ung displeased. "What are you doing?" As soon as he said the boy was unworthy, he was punished. Terror suddenly seized his emotions. The 5th commander was falling freely in the air. Ignoring the screams, Nhak Thien laughed loudly. "I am the one who wants to teach, who allowed you to comment. I do not want to hear your babbling anymore. Get out now." Than Ung respectfully obeyed the order. As he left, he felt pity for the talented twins, but at least he could use Van Hai as a spy. Inside the cave, Nhak Thien was still angry about being disturbed. Van Hai now understood the origin of the black and white demons from his past life. It was because one of the 4 great masters, Nhak Thien, had taught them, but the reason he brought him along was unknown. Van Hai then noticed another strange thing. Nhak Thien stood up and complained of hunger. He coldly ordered him to bring food within 4 hours. Van Hai was confused by that command. He was angry thinking the man had brought him only to find food. After that, Nhak Thien warned him not to think of running away if he was caught. Then he would surely face death, which sent chills down his spine. Van Hai secretly thought differently. He thought if he said "do not run," I would not run. I will go along with his wish, wait for a good chance, and then run away. So Van Hai knelt down and asked, "My lord, but I do not know martial arts. It is hard to find food without a weapon. And the short sword you are holding is my mother's keepsake and is." But before he could finish, Tiu Dam was thrown onto his head. Nhak Thien thought he was too troublesome, then tossed the sword away because he did not need it. Tiu Dam appeared and scolded him for being filthy, moreover using her to pick his teeth, overall disgusting. At that moment, Nhak Thien hesitated and said, "But..." On the left, Tabak received a kick to the face. On the right, Vu Hien took a punch. Nhak Thien was furious because the 2 brothers kept sleeping, only he worried they might die. Nhak Thien's arms roughly pulled the brothers up. When he reached the cave entrance, he stopped for a moment, almost forgot. "I want meat, remember to bring it back." Finally, Nhak Thien jumped away somewhere. Van Hai hurried out to see where he went. he only felt a powerful gust of wind. Then, as he realized, the shock inside him grew stronger. Van High shouted with all his strength, "Where am I?" The cliff, thousands of meters deep, was just one step away. He grew even angrier about the order to find food, since climbing down would already take 4 hours. Van High did not know where to get meat for him. Tu Dam flew over and pointed out something. Over there, the high mountains pierced into the clouds, and Enhak Thien led the twin brothers jumping back and forth. Tu Dam was amazed at that jumping ability. She did not know how he would escape from him, and he himself had lost all motivation. The mountain area had become extremely quiet. Van High was trying to calm himself, because if he gave up, he would become a slave, so he had to do everything he could. But the cliff was too steep, he could not understand how anyone could run there. When he tried to focus on climbing down, he encountered a cracked rock. Then, Van High slid down the cliff. His whole body fell faster and faster. Fortunately, Van High grabbed onto a branch that made him hate life deeply, almost fell to death. Why is my life so miserable? This is already my second life. Tu Dam thought doing so would go down faster, but he was not in the mood for jokes. He cautiously asked how far down he was, but her expression made him give up. By rough observation, the ground still seemed far away. After a long while, someone spoke. 4 hours have passed. Unbelievable that you are still here. You must have ignored the warning, ready to die right. Immediately he stammered, I remembered you, my lord. That strange sentence made the man exclaim, what the hell? What? The scene shifts a little. Beneath the forest, it is extremely quiet. A brown rabbit is looking around anxiously, but it does not know that it is becoming prey. A sound of thud is heard. The small rabbit is hit by an arrow. Tu Dam happily praises that he hit the bullseye. But Van High only dares to sigh softly. Tu Dam thinks he is already good enough, and he also thinks that after 2 months like that, it is only natural. He silently remembers the day he was bruised all over from spending 2 hours climbing down the cliff. Tu Dam also thought that at that time he would be killed. After that, she told him that he should know when to give up at the right time, because the following times he also struggled when escaping. But she sees that today Van High is fine. He happily replies, if I can hunt 1 or 2 more. The next second, a tall man wearing tiger skin jumps down. The impact makes him fall sitting on the ground. Van High forces a smile and says, Sir, you come early. I was just about to climb up. Enhak Thien laughs slyly and asks, so you got food already? I am hungry now. Van High offers the fat rabbit and says it is dinner. When he counts and sees there are 2, his voice lowers. Enhak Thien angrily looks at him. 4 mouths to feed and only 2 rabbits. It seems I must cut down the number of people. The face of Van High looks blank at him. This violent scene is not suitable to watch. Only know that heaven and earth are spinning each time the sound of hitting rings out. He is sad because he has to be hung upside down again, but he is not surprised anymore. He feels tired and does not even know what Enhak Thien is thinking, because he thinks there must be a reason. In fact, for 2 months he has lived like a slave, climbing up and down cliffs where one misstep means death. He even searches the forest to find food. Van High is punched when bringing food back, and punched more when bringing nothing. And after fainting from the beating, he is hung upside down on a tree. Tu Dam angrily asks him, were you not noisy the first time you were hung? He only answers that he has gotten used to it. At that moment, someone comes and calls him. Toa Bok also questions why he cannot bring proper food back. The 2 brothers were beaten together too. Van High smiles secretly at Tu Dam's teasing, then tells him that even without me you would still be beaten. Toa Bok goes straight to the point. The elder is looking for you. Come in. Tu Dam realizes he is called 2 hours earlier, and he also does not know what the elder plans to do. When entering inside, Enhak Thien gives the first order, take off your shirt. Van High hesitantly asks again, but he only hums lightly. He does not know the reason, but his hands already begin to obey. Enhakthen stares at him for a few seconds. He thinks for a bit, then says, "About 2 months already, right? Now you are quite ready." He does not understand, but she is very observant. "Your body looks good from climbing mountains and hunting every day." Enhakthen orders Toabok to hunt food from tomorrow. That makes him resist. Of course, such resistance only deserves a kick. Enhakthen kicks him flying. "Do as I said. Why do you talk so much?" Before going out, he reminds Vu Hyen to cook carefully. Both Tiu Dam and he are confused, seeing his indifference with his bald head. At that moment, a hand rests on his shoulder. A scream echoes through the mountains. That fear is because he is lifted by Enhakthen like a sack of rice. He is scared and begs to be allowed to walk. But Enhakthen shortly replies, "You are good at being troublesome." He thinks he has tried his best because Enhakthen does not use stairs. But instead, he is thrown into a waterfall. The water below is clear, with fish swimming. But when he breaks the piece, the fish scatter. After surfacing, Van Hai shouts angrily, "Why do you keep treating me like this?" Enhakthen only briefly says that he will take him to meet the one who will become his master. But if he stays dirty, it would be rude. Van Hai looks blankly at the 2 words master. Tiu Dam whispers, "Seems like he found out that he himself is the dirty one." Just 1 second later, Enhakthen says, "Bathing is enough, come up." But that is only getting wet, and Tiu Dam also thinks that is why he smells like a beggar. The stream flows gently, covering the surrounding sounds. Van Hai and Enhakthen are walking along the cliff beside it. Tiu Dam is curious because behind the waterfall there is a hidden place. She wonders who would live there. He replies, "For someone who does not want to be found." She playfully disguises herself to tease him. Maybe it is a beautiful master living in seclusion. Then he begins to think that the person Enhakthen asks to take him as a disciple must not be ordinary. After a long walk, he announces they have arrived. Then Enhakthen turns and says, "The person has come." He suddenly turns to him, "What are you doing? Show the respect you should have. This person from now on will be your master." Van Hai kneels on one knee and says, "Blood demon and blood cult forever." Mid-level cadet Chiu Van Hai greets master. However, Tiu Dam thinks they might not accept his respect. She has not finished speaking when he already sees it himself. Tiu Dam blandly says, "I think he has been dead for a long time." She thinks it is a talking skeleton, while he feels he is being toyed with. Enhakthen laughs loudly. "Joke what? Do I look like I have time for that? Do you not know the change that happened to you in these 2 months? Your health increased from climbing mountains. When chasing prey, your legs became stronger and your endurance increased." He also says that when being beaten, your pain tolerance and mental strength increased. Moreover, even when hung on a tree, it is training to give you strong upper body and stable balance. Enhakthen becomes more serious as he speaks. "All of those are for you to have the necessary traits to learn martial arts." Van Hai hesitantly replies, "Elder, I am sorry to say this, but I lost my elixir field since childhood due to inner injury." His laughter becomes stranger. "You think I train you without knowing your body condition? What will you do if there is a way to cultivate without using the elixir field?" The mind of Van Hai seems unable to process it. But a second later, he is completely shocked. Cultivate without using the elixir field. Suddenly, Enhakthen asks if he knows what the elixir field is. Van Hai listens and becomes silent for a moment. He says that it is something he will know when he starts learning martial arts. The small glowing gem at the navel is probably the elixir field he mentioned. Enhakthen continues to say, "Every martial art needs it, and it is also considered the energy core. When a martial artist trains, they use Kai technique to absorb vital energy, and that is called internal energy, and internal energy is stored in the elixir field. But he has a broken elixir field, so he cannot store the absorbed energy. That means he has only 2 things left, absorbed energy and body." Then he asks what is energy. In his mind, he feels uneasy about the matter of controlling internal energy. He guesses that the man intends to explain about original energy. Enhakthen answers, you learned some nonsense before. Original energy is not wrong either. But the true name of what lies in your chest is different. It is the original gift. The vital energy of the original gift is something born with you and cannot be stored by cultivation. It has double the power compared to internal energy accumulated by the elixir field. So he says that he is very lucky, because those writings over there teach him how to control the original gift. Dam is also excited. You won the lottery. With this you can learn martial arts now. But she does not understand why he is not happy, as if he wants to skip this chance. Only Van Hai knows clearly that this thing is essential energy directly related to life. There is only one case when a martial artist uses it. That is when they want to perish together with the enemy. That energy cannot recover. If used too much, the lifespan will shorten. Hearing that, Dam freezes. Van Hai continues to discuss with her. If I learn this and use the original energy, then I will not have much time left to live. He only has one message. That old man thinks I will be happy about this chance. No way. So Van Hai bows 90 degrees. Thanks for teaching me such valuable things. But my foolish mind still does not understand. I lost my elixir field and have no cultivation gift. When I was in the clan, I was always called useless. Please reconsider teaching me this. Dam admires this lying skill. Enhakthen slowly speaks. I worked hard to train your body, and you call yourself useless. I am sure you know some moves from being born in a martial family. Do you think I do not know you are afraid to consume the original energy and die early? Though nervous, he tries to say he does not know. The next second, his arm is grabbed. Enhakthen thinks he speaks badly, so needs help to understand proper learning. He releases a terrible killing intent. You know that if you do not learn this, you will be useless to me. I will let you choose. Want to have your neck broken and die here, or want to learn this and die slowly? Dam advises him to learn, but he thinks that means following the man's plan. Finally, he bravely shouts, "Then please kill me." Enhakthen says in a low voice, "You do not care about your life. You think I will lose anything by killing you. A man with a destroyed elixir field who will never become anything. A third-rank martial artist dares to ask for death. And he is encouraging himself to be brave. If he wants to rise, he must do this." Van Hai hesitantly asks if he will not kill him, because that is how he gambles with his life when desperate. Enhakthen hears his voice. "I am scared, but if I live like that, as you said, I will be used my whole life. Then when I am no longer useful, I will be erased. Because I already have the blood parasite in me, I would rather die than live like that." Hearing that, he pauses a bit. Blood parasite. Then Enhakthen laughs loudly. He drops him down and says, "I cannot believe you still lie right in front of me." He does not understand and asks his meaning. Enhakthen directly answers, "You think I did not check your body. I already knew since I decided to take you along. You better not play tricks again." Then he asks, "If you know, then why do you not do anything?" But he does not care about that because there is something more important. Then Van Hai seems to understand everything. He realizes that if he wanted to kill from the start, he would have done so when he knew he had no blood parasite. Surely he wants something from him. He does not know what, but Van Hai is sure it relates to teaching those things. Next, Enhakthen hint, "Fine, I will propose something that surely interests you. If you follow my words, I will ignore the matter of no blood parasite. It is not hard. After you learn this, you only need to fight those twin siblings, the ones who will learn martial arts from me." Van Hai cannot hold back and exclaims, "What?" Dam is angry, thinking that if he said that earlier they would have agreed sooner. He glances at her. "Cooperate with him. Why should I?" While she finds it interesting. When he asks again, Enhakthen threatens, "Ask again, and I will break your legs. I am easygoing, but that does not mean you can ask nonsense. Finally, I have opened your mind. I am sure now you will follow my words." He orders him to start from feeling the original gift. "When you can feel it, then return to me." Van Hai briefly answers the order. After that, Enhakthen turns away, but does not forget to threaten, If you play tricks, then breaking your legs will not be the end. At this moment, Tu Dam stammers, just my instinct. But I think that old man likes you, and he says that is terrifying. He has no intention of being close. Van Hai thinks he should look through that martial technique. Tu Dam asks, you do not plan to use it. He says he will use it when needed, but the important thing is whether he can learn it. He thinks if people can learn just by looking, then why take a master? Outside, Enhak Thien is calmly riding the wind. He thinks of him like this. Besides courage, he is not stupid. But he regrets that if those writings were complete, it would be wonderful. Of course, if so, he would also find someone more suitable. Because using the original gift, that martial art is the secret technique every martial artist wants to learn. Back here, Van Hai is shouting, impossible. Seeing Tu Dam confused, he explains, if I learn to the end, I can avoid consuming the original gift. Seeing her excited, he finishes the sentence, I cannot die from draining the original gift. She looks very happy, so he has to hold back. Do not be happy yet, I have not finished reading. Van Hai starts to read again. Use internal energy to destroy the elixir field. Move the original light right after that. And when he reads to the end, the writing stops. The last part is missing. Coincidentally, the part teaching how to maintain the original gift. Van Hai angrily shouts, he should at least have written it down, that stupid skeleton. Why die before finishing? At that moment, Tu Dam suddenly says, huh? And Van Hai also remembers, based on what that old man said earlier. Enhak Thien had threatened like this. You want your neck broken and die here, or want to learn this and die slowly. Therefore Van Hai belatedly realizes that he already knew this technique was incomplete. The despair makes him curse the smarter one. Damn it. What does he want me to do with an incomplete instruction? Tu Dam looks puzzled. Hey you, why are you so sensitive? How would I know? Van Hai is confused by her way of speaking. Tu Dam explains, I am talking with this thing. It is very angry when you call it skeleton. He moves his lips for a long time, but does not know what to say. Finally, he concludes she is talking with the skeleton, but of course she means the sword. Tu Dam points at the thing beside. This iron sword, just saw it. Go talk to it yourself. Van Hai then tried to confirm again about her being able to talk with the sword like with humans. However, Tu Dam found him quite dull. I do not talk like humans, because you are special so you can hear the voice of the sword. His face was a bit dazed. I understand. That is the meaning of sword heart in the secret manual of Immortal Sword. Secret martial arts manuals often have vague instructions, so it was described as sword heart. Literally, it should be the voice of the sword. I wonder what power I will receive when the missing part is completed. Next, she told him not to dream. She pointed, saying the sword beside was also attracted when seeing him understand their conversation. Immediately after that, Van Hai reached out his hand. Thien Nam appeared full of longing. I have not been touched by humans for a long time. Seeing him shout, Tu Dam reminded not to make strange sounds. He gently apologized, then touched Thien Nam again. He quickly asked him continuously, Van Hai right, really can hear my voice. Let me introduce myself, I am Thien Nam Sword. That is the name given by Master Thien Nam Sword Saint Ho Chung Dai. Seeing him surprised when hearing that title, Tu Dam asked the reason. It turned out that he had heard of it before. That person was famous for overturning the whole Van Nam town with just one sword. If he had not suddenly disappeared, he would now be one of the top martial artists of Central Plains. There was even a rumor that he might become the 9th Grand Master. He was very curious why such a person would go up an unknown mountain in Guangdong and die like this. He was angry because he thought Hai Enhak Thien was the one who caused that. But Thien Nam shook his head and said it was someone else, and Ku Ti Duong had never won his master even once. Immediately, he fell into thought. One of the 4 supreme figures of the blood sect, but never once defeated Thien Nam Sword Saint. But who could kill a martial artist with such high martial power? To the extent that even Enhak Thien could not possibly defeat him. Thien Nam said he would tell later, because now he still had something important to do. Although very curious, he still nodded, saying he did. He said that after hearing the conversation he understood quite a lot. Van Hai needed to learn this technique and fight with the twins trained by Enhak Thien. Van Hai darkly said if he saw it he would know. But Thien Nam interrupted, "I know." Then to his surprise, he said he would teach him the technique. Tiu Dam was a bit worried. "You agreed so quickly, is it okay?" But he replied that it concerned the honor of Thien Nam Sword Saint. If Van Hai lost because he had not learned his master's martial arts properly, that honor would be defiled, and he hoped that those martial arts would also be passed on to later generations. That was his own wish. Seeing Thien Nam so cool, he agreed, "I hope we cooperate happily." But then, Thien Nam suddenly said need to negotiate. He seriously proposed that he become the new master. Although the honor of the old master was important, but since he was a sword, the most important purpose was not to lose the value of existence. Thien Nam again acted delicate, lamenting loneliness, wanting him to be the new master, then saying something like touch from sheath to blade. Tiu Dam had to step in to stop the chaos. "Too annoying. You make the iron sword strange because of that." Van Hai thoughtfully watched their quarrel. He was thinking about a question. Should I give up the technique completely? Time inside had passed very long. Finally, Van Hai said he would willingly become the master of Thien Nam. But if he acted like a pervert or made strange requests, he would give up learning the technique. Thien Nam accepted, then declared to start learning immediately. The sound of explanation echoed. The place people usually call quantity core is the essence under the belly. Lower quantity core and original heaven talent are in different positions. He said he needed to use the chest to feel the original heaven talent. The previous master called that point middle quantity core. Though hearing for the first time, he guessed, if there are lower and middle, then surely there is upper quantity core, right? Exactly. Thien Nam said the upper part of the forehead is the upper quantity core, the center enlightening the mind. The important thing to do is that Van Hai must feel the original heaven talent in the middle quantity core, starting from sensing the source of life force. Seeing him not know how to feel life force, he said, "If too difficult, then experience with your 5 senses." Van Hai did not expect to use the 5 senses. Thien Nam calmly said, "Life force is easiest to recognize in extreme or life-threatening situations. You will receive power you do not have, or feel strong heat energy rising from your chest. That is the feeling of original heaven talent." Van Hai then understood that those things not only train the body, but help him learn the feeling of original heaven talent. On the other hand, Tiu Dam saw Enhak Thien also beat the twin brothers, to the point of bald-headed Vu Haiyan, and that also became a mystery. Thien Nam then spoke again. "I do not know what happened, but maybe you already felt it." And he confirmed so. Then he told him to remember that feeling, the situation, the emotion and the feeling when he experienced it. Remember the moment Van Hai desired to live to the utmost. He then began to think about when his desire to live was strongest. The timeline rewound to when Enhak Thien was still here, or even further when he met Tin Ku and was beaten. But even further, to the first time he met Truong Hao. And maybe not enough. He also remembered when he first reincarnated and fought with some warriors. The last image Van Hai thought of was the death given by Dung Tu in the previous life. After declaring he would survive, he felt a strange change. Is this original heaven talent? This heat energy, it felt so familiar. Immediately, Tiu Dam remembered he had said those words before. When swallowing the bloodworm and the eardrum was broken, his chest also heated up. Van Hai heard, then nodded, saying yes. Thien Nam continued speaking. "Really surprising. My previous master struggled for months. The fact that you could do it in 4 hours is truly great." He also could not believe such a martial artist would take months, while Tiu Dam thought it was all because he had died and lived again. Thien Nam praised her for using a good metaphor, but in fact he indeed had reincarnated. Next, Van Hai was taught that he must focus on the original heaven talent. We'll see a small mass the size of a fingernail in the middle quantity core. Even if he could not feel it, it was okay. He thought when learning internal skill it would be fine. Conversely, Van Hai said not one fingernail, he saw like 2 fingers. Thien Nam was also very surprised. Using accumulation gate, he would be able to transfer internal energy through meridians and control the original heaven talent. Then he told Van Hai to try punching a stone pillar in that state. But Van Hai thought it was a bit difficult. Tu Dam encouraged that if injured the bone talent heaven gift would heal. Thien Nam also thought if that happened it was good. Van Hai sarcastically said you say easily because it is not your hand. He was a little worried. What would happen if he did not meet their expectations? Being able to use martial arts again was enough for him. Then Van Hai spread his legs wide. He wanted to test how strong he had become. A loud bang suddenly echoed in the cave. Right where he punched, the stone pillar shattered. Tu Dam shouted excitedly, "Amazing! This is the internal energy of someone possessing bone energy heaven talent right." And Thien Nam had already been stunned for a long time. He was very amazed because never encountered such a thing, even though his master's bone energy was great, but still not equal to him. So Thien Nam said with such potential Van Hai could learn faster than ordinary people by 10 years. Just like he had gone through 10 years of life and death. Then suddenly he asked if he had truly reincarnated. And Van Hai kept looking at his hands afraid he was dreaming. Because like this was even better than he imagined. So he kept pondering, is this really the power that I have? The power that I have? Outside, the sky was dark as ink. NH letter 1EA1C Thiern stood there with a gloomy aura. You useless fool! He stepped on Van Hai like on a rag. You are trying to escape from me. Van Hai thought he misunderstood, although he had climbed slopes and gone down the mountain for about 2 months. But a person without lightness, skill, talent like him, how could he return on time? Seeing him tell Van Hai to move faster, Van Hai got quite angry. If I had left half a day earlier, I would have returned on time. Then, NH letter 1EA1C Thiern asked if he could sense the heavenly origin gift yet. Seeing him stay silent, he asked again, I asked whether you could sense it yet. Van Hai hesitated for a long time about that. Now NH letter 1EA1C Thiern understood he not only could not sense the heavenly origin gift, but also could not feel anything within himself. NH letter 1EA1C Thiern propped his chin and laughed. I guess today you did not feel anything at all. Tu Dam did not understand him, but Van Hai explained that whether in the martial world or anywhere else, letting others know about oneself is always disadvantageous. He thought he had confirmed some things. Looking at NH letter 1EA1C Thiern, he saw it was as Thiern Nam said. Those who do not learn heavenly origin gift cannot sense it from others' bodies. NH letter 1EA1C Thiern suddenly laughed sinisterly, almost fooled by you. Seems you are avoiding using your primal power to prolong your life. I guess I must help you realize that you need to speak clearly about this. The deal set was, if Van Hai lost, he would be handed over to leader H letter 183. NH letter 1EA1C Thiern explained that when he brought him, that man had come to check a few times. He did not care about the begging, but that man seemed to want to take Van Hai back. At that moment, Van Hai realized he had never been spared by him once. His lips grew heavier. NH letter 1EA1C Thiern also told that the twins said that man cared much about him. If he told them Van Hai had no blood parasite, he would become a low-ranked disciple for life. Van Hai was a bit shocked, since that differed from what NH letter 1EA1C Thiern promised. NH letter 1EA1C Thiern argued that was before Van Hai tried all tricks to avoid the duel. Hearing him say it was motivation, Van Hai only thought, so that is what you want. I have prepared something for you already. Van Hai spoke softly. You said you would kill me if I lost. Then if I win, is there any reward? H letter 1EA3 INH letter 1EA1C Thiern was amused by that sly remark. He said if Van Hai wanted motivation, he would grant one request if he won. Read them all and get familiar. You will have to learn these martial techniques in the future. The light chakra technique was the answer for him. He had always wondered how to fight when knowing only body training arts. NH letter 1EA1C Theron honestly said he did not know the complete energy technique that Skeleton used, but the light chakra would help balance it, allowing him to learn anything without obstruction. He said he also taught the twins the same. Tiru Dam found it strange. That man truly tried to help you win the duel. The next book was the Star Light Sword Technique. In his mind, Van High had some doubts about it. NH letter 1EA1C Theron explained it belonged to the skeleton, or rather, it was the sword technique his master once used. Van High realized it was the art to unleash the Theron Nam sword. Tiru Dam was puzzled why NH letter 1EA1C Theron had the secret martial manual of Theron Nam's sword, and Van High also doubted whether he found it from corpses. Seeing his frown, NH letter 1EA1C Theron thought he was dissatisfied, but Van High denied it. Yet he dared to ask where NH letter 1EA1C Theron got that secret manual from. NH letter 1EA1C Theron was momentarily speechless. He mumbled, then admitted someone gave it to him. Theron Nam, hearing that, accused him, saying he stole it and intended to use the Star Light Sword technique to defeat his former master. Tiru Dam laughed slyly. Stole it, huh? I guess that old man really wanted to win badly. Next, Theron Nam asked whether NH letter 1EA1C Theron would show Van High the Star Light Sword technique, and Van High said he would for 3 consecutive days. Theron Nam stroked his chin and replied, if he performs it for you, it means he has memorized it completely. He must be using this to perfect his own martial art, and the twins might appear to duel you after their seclusion training ends. Tiru Dam cursed him as a vile scoundrel. Van High thought NH letter 1EA1C Theron did not intend to fight him, but he could not figure out his motive. Tiru Dam angrily said, he is a bastard. Doing that cannot change the truth that he lost to the master of the Theron Nam sword. Right then, Theron Nam said something that surprised them. That was because my former master is dead. My master fought countless times with H letter 1EA3 INH letter 1EA1C Theron, but they never decided victory. Now my master is dead, so no one can know who was greater. That is why he trains you to settle the old score. Tiru Dam remembered he said his master had never lost. Theron Nam corrected. I meant it was a draw. Then Van High asked quietly, whatever happens, it will not change if I lose, right? He thought he still had time, so he would think about how he could manage. Tiru Dam asked how. She told him if he lost to the golden sword in battle, he should use the 8 light short sword. But Van High thought NH letter 1EA1C Theron would not allow it. Theron Nam gently said, no, Van High, do not worry. The Star Light Sword technique he stole was the old version before my master improved it. After my master lost the manual, he trained and refined it. So every movement in the current form shows countless weaknesses of the old version. Although the moves of the old and new versions are similar, the revision removed many flaws. In short, that was how it was perfected. Van High sighed with relief after a day of training. He heard Theron Nam continue, I understand you can learn from the improved version. Though similar to the old, it still differs. If he had not stolen that book, my master would not have thought to improve it, for even before, it was already supreme. Tiru Dam trembled and said, sorry to ruin the mood, but will that crazy old man not be shocked if I use the improved version? She thought NH letter 1EA1C Theron would question him for not following instructions. Theron Nam nodded. Indeed, it is too difficult to refine a sword art that is nearly perfect, because improving sword techniques only happens for those with talent like my master. Van High was very conflicted between 2 choices. If he lost, he would be a low disciple forever. If he won, he must face NH letter 1EA1C Theron's questions. Tiru Dam reminded him that not using the improved version meant losing. Van High understood and decided to use it. Seeing her so worried, he smiled brightly, saying he had his own way. Deep grooves appeared on the ground like trenches after training. The 2 sword spirits were still worried for him, but Van High kept saying it was fine, and he would not repeat past mistakes. The natural scenery there was still peaceful. 2 figures stood at the cave entrance, one of them smiling. It turned out the fifth commander was pleased because he was about to catch Van Hai. He still did not understand how Van Hai luckily became NH1A1C Thiern's prisoner. But now he could no longer rely on him. Then he told D-187 HUY1EC1 NH1EA3I to show his ability as a high-ranked disciple in front of him. The slaughter order was given without hesitation. D-187 HUY1EC1N clasped his hands and accepted the command. On this side, Van Hai heard someone say, "Long time no see Chiu Van Hai." He also politely greeted the captain in return. He calmly excused him from formalities, even mocking that he was doing well as a prisoner. Thien Nam also recognized that it was Captain Ho whom he had mentioned before, the one who often found faults. But Van Hai was more curious about the person beside him, and the reason why he was allowed to follow Captain Ho. After a while, he briefly spoke. "The Grand Elder will be late." "Sir, you came a long way from the Blood Sect. What business brings you here?" But Captain Ho did not answer right away. Instead, he reached out and touched his shoulder. In Van Hai's heart, he thought that he was using internal force to probe his body. Captain Ho said with satisfaction, "I thought if the Elder sent you to handle this matter, you must have some special trait. Turns out your Danshan is still the same." Van Hai found it funny because he could not detect the original talent. After that, Du Haiyan was assigned to serve in his place. The reason was that a hired disciple served much better. He also added, "I do not know how you managed to persuade the Blood Wolf squad leader, but no one has ever seen your grandfather before. I need you to go to the Six Blood Valley for verification." Van Hai broke into a sweat. That man was truly persistent. Unbelievable that he wanted to expose him at all costs. If he were that persistent in martial training, he would have achieved great success by now. Van Hai respectfully said again, "You misunderstand, sir. My grandfather must keep the secret that he was a member of the Blood Wolf. How could he show his face?" And the elder would not be satisfied with only one high disciple. The man furiously shouted, "Arrogant brat, good. I will take this chance to teach you a lesson. Do not be too conceited, and at the same time make a good impression on the elder. Du Haiyan, teach him a proper lesson. I will take responsibility. Just do it." Du Haiyan came closer and closer after responding to him, and Van Hai already sensed the troubles growing. He gently rubbed his neck and said, "I have no prejudice against you, but I cannot let such a good chance slip away, so try to endure the pain." Van Hai was a bit angry because he dared think he was weaker. As soon as his punch tore through the air, Van Hai slightly shifted aside. Vu Haiyan was immediately embarrassed on the spot. The fifth commander was also quite surprised by this. Van Hai, however, understood him clearly, because that was the basic boxing art called 8-blood fist, and the stance was even perfect. But in his eyes, the man's attack was too slow. In fact, Van Hai had reached the second stage of the Starlight secret technique, unexpectedly finding that a high disciple was this weak. Right then, Enhak Thien appeared aggressively. "How dare you try to kill my prisoner?" That made his face freeze. Vu Haiyan fearfully turned his head mechanically. That indescribable authority made him unable to bow properly. Then the man's hand gently pressed his head down. Van Hai stared blankly at the scene before him. It seemed Vu Haiyan was no longer a living being. Next, a scream rang out. Enhak Thien grabbed Captain Ho's head and asked who he was. He trembled and replied in detail, "I am Captain Ho, serving under the command of the Blood Extermination Squad leader." Enhak Thien thought a low-ranking man like him daring to cause trouble in his domain deserved death. Van Hai was terrified because the man could render a martial artist immobile instantly, and she only thought that even if he studied madly, he could never be as strong as that man. While he was replying to her, another voice rang out, "Du Lang is never any good. I heard that recently you have been learning swordsmanship. Still healthy. You look well." At that moment, Toa Bok noticed Captain Ho, and Van Hai focused his attention on the two brothers. For only a few days, their bodies had recovered so much. He did not know how hard they had trained. But then, the slightly bald head caught his attention. Van Hai did not know what they had to endure. At that time, Toa Bach was astonished seeing the unmoving body on the ground. Meanwhile, a pleading voice sounded again, "Please listen to me. We still do not know what background that man has. Please let me investigate him." And Hak Thien replied he was not interested, and another arm punched out. His eyes turned white, and several teeth in his mouth were broken. And Hak Thien spoke in a low tone. "Before I said I was not interested in your nonsense, yet you still brought another person here." He let go and dropped Captain Ho. Then he turned to Van Hai and said, "So he brought someone to replace you. He must really hate you." Van Hai recounted how he had killed 2 of his subordinates. Toa Bach and Vu Hien froze like statues. And Hak Thien curiously asked, "You killed his subordinates. They were fools. How could they be killed by someone without inner strength? The weak must die. That is only natural and predictable." Then he ordered both of them to be thrown off a cliff or somewhere else. Toa Bach and Van Hai felt rather awkward and asked again. He angrily cursed, so the man had to call Vu Hien to let Du Hien bury them in the forest. Next, and Hak Thien laughed and said, "You have just gotten into a very troublesome situation, because that man has his eyes on you. The strength of those bastards is that once they bite, they never let go. You will not be lucky like this again. This is your chance." Van Hai clasped his hands respectfully. He also knew he had to seize that chance. So Van Hai wanted to go with Toa Bach. The man hesitantly asked, "I do not mind, but can you keep up?" Van Hai said he seemed to be tiring, so he would carry him for the second half of the road. Before finishing, a green object flashed past his face. Van Hai was startled non-stop. "What is wrong with that bastard? He is running on the cliff." Toa Bach kept running and teased that he was too slow. Tu Dam thought he should also learn lightness skill, and Van Hai also thought it would be great to learn the lightness art of Sword Master Thien Nam. Then Tu Dam told Thien Nam to tell him about it, and he was willing to teach Van Hai that lightness skill. Thien Nam held tighter and said, "But you cannot run on a cliff like this unless you use the lightness technique of Hai and Hak Thien." My master was also impressed by it. He did not pay attention to the two fighting, only thought about the greatness of that master. But anyway, he thought he still had to hurry up a bit. Moreover, he did not know whether Toa Bach understood what the elder said or not. After a while, the 5th commander was thrown to the ground. Toa Bach wiped his sweat and said, "I think throwing him here is fine." He wondered if they should finish him off. Then Van Hai appeared and asked what he was doing. Toa Bach casually said, "You finally came. That crazy old man is rambling again. Just right. I need something to vent on. Perfect timing." Toa Bach said he would break his legs to cripple him. Hearing that sharp tone, Van Hai only drew his sword and said, "I think you are mistaken. You think that old man will stop at breaking legs." A series of question marks appeared like his confusion. Toa Bach vaguely mentioned silencing witnesses, making him think the man pitied him. Meanwhile, Captain Ho still had not woken up. The sound of argument continued. Van Hai said, "If you do not do it, then let me." Then a shoe flew straight into Toa Bach's face. Luckily Van Hai dodged in time, and Toa Bach flew away like a sack of rice. The angry voice shouted, "What did you bastards just say?" Van Hai was quite surprised that he had awakened. He was annoyed that Toa Bach had not sealed Captain Ho's pressure point on the way down. The man laughed viciously. "So you took this chance to strike at me, huh? I will make you regret missing the chance to kill me." The sly laughter grew louder. He scornfully asked, "What are you going to do with that sword?" Thien Nam rubbed his chin because he realized that the man did not know the boy could use martial arts. Van Hai also replied, "That is right. I need to strike while he is off guard." He rushed forward like a beast. "You think someone without a dantian can hit me?" But the boy only managed to raise one hand lightly in front. The next second, a surge of power helped him face the punch. Moreover, Van Hai even forcefully pushed that strike back. Captain Ho was terrified for a moment. What? While he was shocked, Van Hai seemed to be gliding forward. A slash stretched across his body. Van High had swung a strike from low to high. The fresh blood sprayed out, making him scream in pain. Van High still kept his stance, while the opponent had fallen backward. He was very happy knowing that he could use internal strength. Thien Nam also praised, "It is only your first time using sword art, and it is already like this. Not bad. But do not lose focus because of that, Van High. Your opponent is a top martial artist. Now it truly begins." He was confused because earlier he saw no energy from the boy, but the strike still had power. The fifth commander's mind started to become chaotic, but he forced it away. 1 second later, Van High jumped up from somewhere. The place he was about to land was right where Captain Ho stood. Then Van High swung a move Ma Dong Lu En Han. It made him only able to lower his head to dodge. But Van High was still madly slashing, forcing him to keep stepping back. Captain Ho was terrified because even when his life faced death, he never thought of using Ma Dong Lu En Han. He could not believe that the boy, even with a destroyed Danshin, could still use martial arts. Then Captain Ho concluded that the boy was a dangerous person who must be dealt with carefully. He gritted his teeth and shouted, "This bastard, I will not let you survive." On the other side, Toa Bak had now woken up. The mountain clouds were still peaceful as if nothing happened. Before him was thick smoke and dust. The first thing Toa Bak said was, "Since when did Captain Ho wake up? How could he be fighting Van High one-on-one?" At that moment, Van High rose up. The lower part of his chest was kicked. The opponent cruelly poured all his strength into the kick. On the ground appeared a long line. That was the trace of being pushed back. Thien Nam was very worried if he was okay. Van High quickly reassured that he was fine. Moreover, he had guessed part of the move and reduced the damage. It was the first time he faced a top master, so he had not yet adapted. Compared with the martial artists he had met, this man was on a different level. Thien Nam thought that earlier he had weakened the man, and Tu Dam also said that prolonging time would be beneficial. After hearing that, he immediately agreed. At that moment, someone shouted, "Move away, Chiu Van High." The shout ended, and that person quickly ran forward. Toa Bak said that he had done well holding him back. From now on he would handle things himself. The boy should just watch him fight. Captain Ho only saw him as an obstacle. He told him to get lost and wait for his turn. Then he directly punched him. "After I deal with Van High, I will kill you next." In the next blink, he himself was struck and his face twisted. A delighted laugh rang out, "You bastard." It turned out Toa Bak had flipped his body and kicked him. Thien Nam admitted that the kick must have hurt badly. Even more amazing was that he could counterattack while being attacked. Toa Bak grinned from ear to ear. "You are good, but if that is all, how can you defeat me? Get ready to die. I will return all the humiliation from the selection event." Captain Ho fell back and cursed. When he stood upright again, a stream of liquid spewed from his mouth. The fresh blood immediately splashed onto Toa Bak's face. He gathered inner strength into his fist. "You stubborn bastard. If you want, I will kill you first." Both Tu Dam and Van High held their breath in fear. But Van High knew that in this situation he could not block that move. Then he thought of one thing, if so. So Van High crouched down while they were fighting. He decided to push Toa Bak away from the enemy's punch. And when the enemy missed during his attack, that would reveal a weakness. And the final thing was to finish him off. His robe fluttered with his quick movement. On the wooden surface appeared the sword tip stained with blood. A drop of sweat fell. He thought this would be the finishing strike. Captain Ho forced a laugh in pain. He accepted it because the boy's hand and sword would also be stuck, and he could use the steel ground technique to break the boy's arm. Only Van High realized that this was the chance. He believed with the 8-sound short sword he could end him. As the fresh blood sprayed, he still thought to himself, "Thanks to this I am quite sure." But he did not expect the man still blocked it, even mocking him as a pitiful thing. Van High was shocked because he did not expect the man's energy was still that strong, even though he was already badly injured. He was still trying hard to resist, and Van Hai saw that his blood energy would not last long. Captain Ho still laughed wickedly. I may be hurt, but you cannot kill me. Van Hai secretly thought that with the Starlight secret technique only at the first level, he had not yet drawn out his full power. At that moment, Toa Bok suddenly shouted, "Hold your short sword tightly." Then suddenly he rushed from somewhere and closed in on the two. Wait, good, keep it like that. When Van Hai leaned aside, he jumped up and kicked straight. Captain Ho's whole body was bathed in a sea of blood. The sword had pierced deep into his arm. Then he was thrown far away. When everything ended, Thien Nam commented that if not for Toa Bok's kick, the man could have lasted much longer. Van Hai agreed. He knew that if he had fought alone, it would have been terrible. Toa Bok smiled brightly. That bastard dared to spit blood on my face. Van Hai looked at him with a dark expression because he thought this was the first time Toa Bok had killed someone. Unexpectedly, he said the boy owed him a life. Knowing that Toa Bok was taking the chance to boast, Van Hai just went along. Toa Bok said that they would soon face each other, but the winner would be him. If that happened, Toa Bok would become Enhak Thien's disciple. Hearing that, he realized Enhak Thien had promised that to him. Toa Bok then put his arm around Van Hai's shoulder and asked, "According to what I heard, you will also have to serve me if I win." The boy thought he was too confident. Toa Bok said it was natural because the boy would not even touch him. Next, Van Hai suggested, "Then let us bet. Whoever loses will become the subordinate of the winner. I am confident. How about you?" Toa Bok agreed and turned away. "Fine, just wait and see." But Van Hai said that he should stay to help clean up the mess. The last thing he heard was, "See you later." Though left behind, Van Hai was not angry. He knew that in the future the loser would kneel before the winner. A very exciting thought. Then Thien Nam appeared again because he heard the boy call. It turned out Van Hai wanted to ask about Enhak Thien's Thunder Body technique, which was more advanced than the Starlight secret technique. Thien Nam nodded and thought it was because he wanted to learn. But Van Hai only replied with hidden meaning, "I understand." The upcoming battle between me and Toa Bok. It seems it will be very worth looking forward to. When returning to the cave, Toa Bok reported that he had completed the task assigned by Enhak Thien, so he was praised by him. But Enhak Thien was not pleased to see him return alone. Toa Bok had to explain that Van Hai's lightness skill was slower than his. Surely in about 30 or 45 minutes, he would be able to climb up there. He said that since Van Hai had not been properly trained, climbing slowly was nothing strange. Enhak Thien glanced once and immediately knew Toa Bok had internal injuries. So he asked directly, "Who killed that Captain Ho?" When he heard that it was Toa Bok, he laughed joyfully. "So that's how it is. Seems like you landed the fatal blow." Toa Bok felt slightly irritated inside because he realized Van Hai was right. Then Enhak Thien spoke again, "You just faced a martial master. It was fortunate that the two of you worked together or else you would have been more injured." When he thought Van Hai would look worn out, the boy appeared. However, that expression showed he had guessed wrong. Van Hai concisely reported, "Sir, I have taken care of Captain Ho as you requested," and his clothes and hair were all neat and clean. Enhak Thien immediately rewarded the disciple with extra training time. The man's voice of protest rang out, "It's a misunderstanding. Mostly I was the one who acted." In that situation, he only threatened Captain Ho. But then, Enhak Thien told him to shut up, and a gust of wind whooshed past. Toa Bok was thrown hard against the cave wall without mercy. Tu Dam saw that he was in great pain, while Van Hai realized the less he talked, the less he would be beaten. At that moment, Enhak Thien told him he could go after reporting, but he replied that he still wanted to discuss the wish that had been promised. Enhak Thien remembered it was about the victory agreement and decided to listen. Van Hai modestly said it was nothing major. Then he expressed admiration for Enhak Thien's wall-climbing lightness technique. Actually, if he did not want to teach, it was fine, but Van Hai wanted to learn that move. Enhak Thien was slightly pleased and replied, You mean my lightness technique. Very well, I promise you. Van Hai was deeply grateful and thanked him, while Tu Dam did not expect things to go so smoothly. It turned out Van Hai had understood from the start that Enhak Thien was confident he would not win in the competition. Then, Enhak Thien briefly announced, "The duel will take place after 3 months. Since Captain Ho is dead, you have one less concern. It is best for you to train as if losing means death." Van Hai bowed lower and thanked him. Now, Enhak Thien dismissed him to have time to train with the twins. Outwardly he was respectful, but in his heart he had already determined to master the lightness technique. Outside, Thien Nam immediately asked, "How do you feel about using the Starlight secret technique for the first time in real combat?" Van Hai thought and replied, "Somehow I managed to kill Captain Ho. But thinking back, the first strike landed too easily. It must be because he had internal injuries from Enhak Thien." Thien Nam agreed with him, since that move itself was not some ultimate technique, just one of the 18 basic sword forms. His late master could have killed him in one strike. Van Hai was astonished. He was that strong. Tu Dam interrupted. "Anyway, you have already won. You have eliminated that troublesome captain. Now just focus on training." Van Hai murmured, "The duel is still 3 months away. Based on Toa Bok's fighting style today, it could be said he is a formidable master. But today are we only practicing sword forms?" Thien Nam explained, "Of course, if you do not master the 18 basic sword forms, then you are merely dancing with the sword." He said they would not learn anything new until those basics were deeply carved into Van Hai's mind. Tu Dam suddenly called out. She hesitantly asked, "Do you know how Van Hai asked to learn that old man's lightness technique? Don't be upset about that. He is new to martial arts and just wants to learn that move." Thien Nam indifferently replied, "Do I look upset?" It turned out her meaning was that Van Hai is the successor of the sword master Thien Nam, yet he is trying to learn the lightness technique of the sword master's enemy. He rubbed his chin and said, "If I think of it that way, maybe I would feel upset indeed." Even though Van Hai is inheriting his late master's martial arts, he is not his replacement. A martial artist who wants to grow stronger must understand many martial disciplines. That is natural. He was hinting about the future battles with Enhak Thien. Moreover, also implying Toa Bok. At this time, Toa Bok had completely fallen backward. Enhak Thien scolded him with utter disdain. "Fool! I personally demonstrated the Starlight sword technique to you. Where was your mind?" Then Toa Bok hesitantly asked, "Do I have to master that sword technique so thoroughly?" "My opponent is only that Van Hai." Just as he was about to mock further, he received his punishment. The staff glowed brightly as if to intimidate Toa Bok. Enhak Thien continued to scold, "Pathetic fool! After today's battle you still learned nothing. Right now Van Hai is training 2 secret arts by himself. Yet he did not suffer any internal injury after fighting Captain Ho." Toa Bok insisted that was impossible since he had seen Van Hai get hit several times. Enhak Thien asked back, "Do you think I cannot tell if he has internal injuries or not? Having fought him at close range, you should understand him better than I do. Because you underestimated him, you failed to see how skilled he is. You basically just wasted the chance I set up for you." Toa Bok grew angrier for always being compared to Van Hai, so he vowed to win. Then he requested to see the technique again. Enhak Thien found it amusing that he kept being beaten but still asked to watch. Toa Bok shouted loudly that training at this level was nothing. He had to show that his skill surpassed Van Hai's. Even while being beaten, he still declared, "Just wait and see. I will definitely defeat Van Hai in the duel." Enhak Thien's voice turned stern. "If you are truly determined, then show it through action, not words." Then he told him to complete his training by showing him the martial method. Toa Bok hesitated because he seemed to realize that teaching that meant taking him as a disciple. A loud, resolute voice echoed across the sky. "The disciple will train to the last of his strength, master." Enhak Thien calmly asked, "Who said I accepted you as a disciple?" At that moment, the slogan resounded again, "Blood Demon forever." Blood demon rules the world. Commander of the Blood Elimination Squad, Ku Thanong, expressed his loyalty to the Supreme Elder. He coldly replied, "You just need to deliver the provisions to the entrance of my dwelling." Thanong hesitantly asked, "Sir, do you know if Captain Ho and a disciple came to see you today?" As a result, Nhak Thien said he did not know and dismissed him. Thanong stubbornly recounted that the man had told him he wished to meet today. Nhak Thien emphasized every word. "Commander of the Blood Elimination Squad, are you disturbing me over a mere captain?" And so Thanong never asked about that matter ever again. The scene shifted slightly to the icy mountains, yet the waterfall here still flowed swiftly. Beneath the trees sat Van Hai meditating. His focus was extremely high. He sat cross-legged, hands in a meditation gesture. At that moment, the ice above his head cracked loudly. The ice block lost its hold and fell. By calculation, in a few seconds he would be injured. But Van Hai calmly sat still. He reached for the Thien Nam sword behind his back. 3 overlapping slashes formed a star pattern. The ice block was dealt with that way. Then it broke into smaller pieces. He continued swinging his sword, striking several more times. Thien Nam commented that his stance was not proper. Only Tiu Dam thought it was fine. Van Hai said there was no need to argue, only to try his best. Then, while walking forward, he said, "All right then." Van Hai told them they should go to the location where the agreed battle would take place. The high mountain had turned to ice from months ago. The branches had also become much more withered. Van Hai just asked about how far his swordsmanship had reached. On the other hand, Thien Nam thought it was still not good and far behind his former master. But in the past 3 months he had practiced very hard. He felt it was because that man taught well. At that time Tiu Dam was a bit angry for being forgotten. Van Hai gently said thank you to her. But she thought it was still too superficial for a thank you. That gaze made him afraid. He thought the sword spirit with a woman's personality truly was competitive. Tiu Dam spun around and shouted, "You should pay attention that the upcoming contest uses the Starlight Sword technique." However, she saw herself in the previous contests. She had defeated 3 people, proving she had never failed in those matches. Thien Nam calmly spoke, "Just consider it that way, but this time is completely different to the point where it could cost the opponent's life." Tiu Dam pouted in agreement. "Right, it is a contest of higher and lower skill." Van Hai pushed her aside and asked Thien Nam one thing. During the past 3 months, although he had tried the Starlight Sword technique was very complicated, he had only learned 3 moves, so he did not know whether he could win. He nodded and replied, "Good question, though only 3 moves, they are the essence of swordsmanship. Compared to my master, they are nothing, but for this contest they are enough. 1 sword, 1 kill. Learning many is not as good as mastering few." Seeing him use the moves, Thien Nam found him already quite skilled. The sword technique was finished, so he only needed to believe in himself. After that, Thien Nam also encouraged him more, ignoring Tiu Dam, who was very angry. Van Hai thought for a moment, then found it true. Even if hard, he must win. When he just arrived, he saw Nhak Thien looking at him with great excitement. He sharply said, "Good for you. I thought you were too scared and ran away for 3 months. You prepared well, right?" Van Hai respectfully replied, "Yes, everything will be shown through today's contest." Right then Tiu Dam told them to look ahead. She quickly asked if he saw the twin brothers a bit different from before. Moreover, Nhak Thien had also covered himself in black. First they evaluated Toa Bok. The 2 sword spirits both found him too sturdy, and he also thought they had improved greatly. Then the next was Vu Haiyan. The 2 sword spirits paid attention to his completely bald head, and he thought that man might have the iron head technique. Nhak Thien understood that he had realized their change inside. Van Hai was guessing whether those 2 still had unrevealed things. After that, Nhak Thien spoke. The competition rule is quite simple. Fight until one side can no longer continue. But note, this contest of life and death depends on fate, no blaming allowed. Van Hai immediately understood and asked who he would compete with. Toa Bach stepped out to greet him. He thought if so he would have more advantage. But the new gloves of that man were quite special. Toa Bach laughed and said, "What is surprising? You use sword. I use fists. It looks like you have more advantage. But let me say this fist technique is what the elder used to dominate the world." Van Hai was not afraid and began to swing his sword. He thought everyone had their strengths. He was good at defense, then he would attack. He did not forget to provoke. Your physique fits well with fist fighting, but do not be too arrogant. Thien Nam and Tiu Dam were both pleased with the good start because he had provoked successfully. Indeed, Toa Bach gradually lost his calm and cursed several words. He rushed forward like a charging bull, shouting for him to take the hit. Van Hai only thought, "Good, come on, a guy like you is easily provoked with a swordsman. I must fully use the distance advantage to perform sword moves at the right moment while not letting him close in to punch." The sword blades following the zigzag path of the starlight sword technique appeared. After that he reversed the sword tip to perform the Tiger Fang destroying world move. The continuous slashes forced him to pull back and defend. Before Enhak Thien was the scene of his disciple facing the dust storm. He quite enjoyed his move. It seemed this guy had some talent. After 3 months the sword move was very powerful. But those two brothers were not mere dummies with only that move then. The next second indeed Toa Bach caught him. After that his right hand continuously punched several times. Moreover, Toa Bach did not forget to provoke. "See how terrifying my heavenly fist is. You also tried but cannot win." Just as he punched horizontally with great force, he quickly lowered himself. The next movement stunned him. It turned out Van Hai rolled backward, intentionally kicking upward into his chin, and he also kept his distance conveniently. But Van Hai also felt a bit dangerous because the power when close was too strong. 1 second later the fight changed again. Toa Bach ran forward and kicked Van Hai into a wooden log. He wiped his wound and said, "Excellent kick, a swordsman, but delivered such a powerful kick." Van Hai modestly replied, "Too kind, your body is big so that kick was nothing. But your internal strength has improved. Do you have a secret?" Toa Bach answered it was because practicing fists increased inner power. That made Van Hai more annoyed, because he realized that man had drunk spiritual medicine. He curved his lips into a smile, hiding his thoughts. While practicing he now thought that the current battle time was still too early to realize that. In the future these two brothers Ho Nam Song Tuan would become top masters of the blood sect, famous as the Black and White Twin Slayers. But now he saw him quite foolish and easily angered, but time would help him gain fortune and progress. Van Hai knew he had been careless, making the situation difficult. He murmured, "I have been wrong for a long time." Toa Bach told him to speak louder, so Van Hai emphasized, "I have underestimated you. From now on, I will fight with all my strength to the death." That face was clearly shocked by those words. Right at that moment on Toa Bach's shoulders suddenly shot out blood like a waterfall. And Van Hai had already landed behind him since when. Enhak Thien also widened his eyes watching the match. Toa Bach still could not understand why his sword move was so fast. He himself had no time to see. Enhak Thien's mouth corner twitched in anger. Van Hai understood that it was because he did not expect Toa Bach to lose so badly. But he declared this was only the beginning. The good part is still ahead, so just wait and see. Just wait and... Reversing back to the past a little, the wooden stick swung up following the shout. Again, it struck straight into the head of Toa Bach. Enhak Thien said, "Why do you still not understand? To use fist technique to fight against sword, you must follow closely the movement of the sword move so that you can make it deviate from the sword path." Toa Bach trembled to defend himself, even though he understood, but your moves are too fast, so he could not keep up. Enhak Thien then knocked on the head of Toa Bach a few more times. "Cannot see, then I will hit until you can see." The hoarse shouting sound has covered the memory like that. Returning to the present, Toa Bach is thinking, even though he has been hit too many times by Tin Kwang's sword technique. But all the moves Van Hai used he still could not dodge. He saw that level already equal to the elder. No one taught, but frighteningly he is very strong. Van Hai now spoke. Why not stand up yet? Want to give up? Toa Bok of course supported himself up immediately. He cursed silently because someone like you dared to mock me. He has been personally taught by the elder. Has trained to counter Tin Kwang's sword technique every day, with training intensity like hell. So Toa Bok did not give up, decided to fight with all his strength. Therefore he shouted, "Continue, bastard." And Hak Thien suddenly laughed extremely sinisterly. On this side, Thien Nam had said he has inherited all of his ultimate techniques. Tiu Dam did not think he could also add Kim Kang Indestructible. He said gloomily, "In this case, I guess Van Hai can only follow the plan." Right at that moment, the sword mark of him was dividing both sides. Then he was pushed back by his force. Thien Nam's sword was immediately gripped tightly. He directed the sword handle downward. In fact, once the sword move is performed, it will surely explode early when the blade thrusts straight, aiming at the weakness of the opponent. That is the way to perform the first form. And right after that second, Van Hai had drawn several sword lines there. Toa Bok continued to be forced into passive stance before Ho Nha Annihilation Sword. Now, he understood that although he could not see the whole trajectory, but could still block the sword if he guessed the next movement. Being hit twice, but they only scratched his skin, so he could still act as he wanted. But he also grasped the scheme to lock his sword move. Moreover, his lightness skill part was also much more proficient. So defeating him is no longer as easy as before. He thought should attack the lower body to limit movement. Van Hai continued to create bright green sword aura. Toa Bok realized that it was again Ho Nha Annihilation World Sword. That is a strong move aimed to create great pressure on the opponent. Toa Bok determined to slowly approach, then release a series of Ba Sat Heaven fists at once. And when the moment came, he would hold the sword move up slower. Then, Van Hai again drew a spiral with sword light. He thought slightly. Hulu Slash is a sword move both real and false, aiming to confuse, making the opponent unable to focus. Instead of deviating each sword move, I only focus on rushing close. And it seemed Toa Bok saw it effective. He knew Van Hai wanted to maintain distance again. That is the keen point in his fighting. Using one left hand and body, always keeping balance, is Tin Kwang's sword technique second form. Hidden Meditation Slash. The move creates collision with the opponent to create space for oneself. However, Toa Bok knew it would not fully work if the performer cannot foresee the enemy movement. Currently, he has been unbalanced. The chance came, so Toa Bok immediately gathered force into his fist. Van Hai was turning as if about to fall, and his fist had already filled with energy. The rocks scattered down the ground. Toa Bok was very pleased, having broken the sword technique. Toa Bok silently asked, "Now what will you do, Van Hai? I know all weaknesses in your Tin Kwang sword technique. It is no longer effective on me." Conversely, Thien Nam said the plan was quite successful. Even Tiu Dam became more excited. Van Hai curved his lips, smiling because he was just pretending carelessness to make him complacent. And now the moment he waited for had come. Thien Nam said blandly, "Then everything will follow the intention." Tiu Dam also agreed because everything followed the plan. Those injuries will all heal quickly because of inner energy when training Nguyen Thien gift. When running through one full cycle, it will work fast. But Van Hai still felt pain. But anyway, with this thing, he could still show Hak Thien that Tin Kwang's sword technique in secret has been broken. If Van Hai still used it, then he would truly be a fool. Now he needs to use improved Tin Kwang sword technique to fight, with the reason being self-comprehension, then no one can refute. Conversely, Toa Bok was still eagerly expecting him to attack more. He thought that if he tried to attack as much it would be useless, but the unexpected happened. In front of him was the move Hidden Meditation Slash, and surprisingly it was sharper than usual. The sword blades crossed, slashing toward. He pressed his legs until dust flew everywhere. Hak Thien also noticed the sword move had changed. Toa Bok could not help exclaiming, "Bastard, what did you just do?" Van Hai smiled brightly, replying, "You broke the sword technique, so I changed a bit, like it." He felt fear because impossible to do that. But the truth was it happened before his eyes. Toa Bak could only feel everything stronger and much harder to approach. His leg had collapsed down one side under the strike. However, that was not a problem. He still saw a gap even though the move had changed, and Toa Bak needed to shorten the distance at that moment. So he had to seize the opportunity. A strong punch struck straight at him. Van Hai partly gave up when taking the blow. But then, Toa Bak quickly became bewildered again, because his arm had been blocked by Van Hai. He had used left hand to block and keep balance, while still maintaining distance, and counterattacked with the second form. Next, a stream of sword aura with icy color from the second form flashed across. Van Hai, while running forward, kept slashing many hidden meditation slashes. The final destination of the sword tip was Toa Bak. At that moment, Van Hai realized, performing hidden meditation slash perfectly. But why did my hand take injury, feeling like hitting iron steel? His eyes deeply looked at him. It turned out a strange thing had happened with the body of Toa Bak. It seemed the lower Danshin was regenerating strength for him. Van Hai heard a voice. Not over yet. He was quite puzzled when the two gloves were taken off. Thien Nam only said that was the golden blood form. That information struck his ears like lightning. So he had used that this battle would be very different from what he had experienced. Thien Nam told him to immediately get away from the opponent. Next, a sound full of killing intent rang out. Hey Chiru Van Hai. Where are you looking at? The punch did not hit but still left a scratch. Van Hai saw him move unbelievably fast, because before his lightness skill was already fast. Now being taught it improved even more. That punch was only a warning to him. If he used the fist technique for real, then he would not be able to dodge. Van Hai did not think he would go through such a difficult moment. So what needed to be done was to end this fight immediately. This time, his sword lines curved like ocean waves. Van Hai rode that wave and rushed forward. And on the other side, Toa Bak also ran closer. Behind him was a hot surging interior force. Van Hai's sword lines were extremely sharp. However, they could not pierce through Toa Bak's defense layer. Then, Van Hai suddenly stopped his movement. A great force had punched through his body. A muscular arm was surging with primal energy, and before him was the scene of dust flying everywhere. Van Hai found it hard to breathe from being punched in the chest. He was a little terrified because this astonishing strength was even stronger than before. Next, a human cannonball was flying over. Van Hai was somewhat startled by that transformation. Toa Bak's eyes emitted sparks. He swung a leg up, and his sturdy shin struck down hard. Below, Van Hai used both hands to form a shield to block the attack. He was quite happy to have blocked that move. It was hard to create an opportunity to counterattack. Then, the two bands of sword from the hidden meditation slashed out again. Toa Bak's whole body was pushed and thrown into a boulder, but he could still stand up. When Toa Bak stood up, the dust from the previous strike had not yet dispersed. He gritted his teeth and said, "Damn it, I no longer have enough time. Whenever you see me getting too close, you use hidden meditation again, if so." Suddenly countless boulders appeared before Van Hai, and he looked very small compared to that hail of rocks. Van Hai both cut them away and thought, is it meant to mislead? This move felt more like a real attack. Just then, Toa Bak suddenly appeared. He also knew he was coming very fast. But while blocking the sword, Van Hai was stunned. Is it Toa Bak? Seeing the cracks on his body, he feared he was not all right. The sword in his hand also gradually tilted downward. Toa Bak shoved him away and asked, "You are worried about me?" Then he advanced fiercely. "Don't act as if you are better than me, bastard." Thien Nam reminded him that continuing would be very dangerous. Need to think of a way to cope, and he himself could not hold out much longer. Conversely, Thien Nam said he was not worried for him, but for Toa Bak. When he accompanied his former master, he had witnessed and Hak Thien's golden blood form several times. However, Thien Nam saw that his skin did not swell or flake like his. so that could be a side effect of using a martial art that exceeded control. If this continued, he feared Toa Bok would die. He also knew what Thien Nam wanted to say, but actually even Van Hai's Tiger Fang sword effort, and even the very strong Hulu slash, could not stop Toa Bok. Van Hai could win by prolonging this fight, but if so, he would really die. He needed to win while ensuring he survived. Then, a sharp sword light was stabbing straight into the middle of Toa Bok. Everything almost froze, because his sword had opened a bloody path. Van Hai was furious. That madman, if I had hesitated a bit longer, it would have pierced through his chest. Toa Bok clenched the blade of Thien Nam's sword. Van Hai was very confused about what to do. Toa Bok then seized the opportunity to throw another punch. At that moment, Van Hai seemed to remember something. That was the way to resolve this situation. Right now, the two hands of the two sides intertwined tightly. Toa Bok's eyes flashed slight surprise. As for Enhak Thien, he looked extremely profound. Tu Dam anxiously shouted, "How can a swordsman come close to someone fighting with fists and feet?" But Thien Nam realized. It turned out he was trying to resolve the situation by using an internal force battle. Van Hai intentionally let Toa Bok's inner power merge with his own inner power, forcing him to exit the golden blood form. Tu Dam feared the use of Nguyen Thien Phu. Thien Nam also found that extremely unfavorable. Toa Bok's whole body was enveloped by hot orange Kai. Van Hai let his Nguyen Thien Phu erupt. Just as Tu Dam panicked because he was being pushed back, Thien Nam told her to look at his expression. At a glance, Toa Bok seemed to have the upper hand, but surely he would be exhausted first. Thien Nam was impressed with his determination to kill, and Van Hai not only had high martial skill but also a chivalrous spirit. If things continued like this would be Van Hai's perfect victory. To letter 1EA1 Bok spoke in a terrifying voice, an internal force duel. How dare you play that game with me? But 1 second later, he was almost exhausted in front of him. That was when the blood form was dispelled. After that, Toa Bok's whole body was flung backward. Enhak Thien intervened from nowhere with a palm strike on him. Moreover, Van Hai was also pushed away by that intrusion. He fell to the ground with a very loud thud. Meanwhile, Van Hai was still flying several meters. After landing, he asked, "Why did you intervene in the duel?" "Is that so, Elder Man Demon Enhak Thien?" He only smiled and replied, "I saved you from depleting your inner energy, and you can only say a few words about it." Because there was still no decisive victor, Enhak Thien declared this match a draw. Van Hai's face immediately froze. He continued to question why Van Hai did not use the secret sword technique he had been given. So he replied, "Am I stupid to do that? I know you have fully mastered it, which means you know both its strengths and weaknesses. So if I used it unchanged, those two twins could already counter me." Enhak Thien curled his lip and asked again, "So that is why you changed it?" He nodded firmly to confirm once more. He did not trust him and asked whether someone else had transmitted it to him. Of course he would not answer truthfully. Enhak Thien snorted coldly. "The sword techniques you used are only that much. I have already seen all your flaws." But in truth Van Hai deliberately prevented him from scrutinizing. Then he heard Van Hai ask him, "Did you know? Did you think that the former owner of this sword technique had once revised and perfected it further? Could such a refined sword art not be improved?" Enhak Thien roared the name Thien Nam in a blaze of anger. But in the end he calmed and said that saying more was pointless. Yet Van Hai stubbornly insisted that if there had been no intervention he would have won. Because judging from Toa Bok's condition it was obvious. Enhak Thien still obstinately affirmed the 4 words undecided. He protested aloud, "You are excessive. Do you really think doing this is fair? Please reconsider." The truth was Van Hai only had half of the cultivation method, and Toa Bok had inherited all of the elder's boxing techniques. Moreover, he knew all the weak points of Van Hai's sword art. He had even used pill elixirs to strengthen his inner energy, and there were the rare gloves assisting him. Van Hai was helpless, not knowing what to do in that situation. But he had won a fight that was predetermined for him to lose. He forcefully questioned him. If you will not recognize my victory, then did you want me to die from the start? Am I only your pawn? Do you think he could match me in a fair fight? If you had not strengthened his inner energy or given him those gloves then. Enhak Thien laughed wildly upon hearing that. He stamped his foot heavily on the snowy ground. The recoil immediately sent Toa Bak flying up. He directly questioned him. Who allowed you to use that? I told you you could not fully control it. That foolish thing aside, did I give you pill elixirs? He hinted at the nightly elixir. Enhak Thien squeezed his hand tighter. You call that elixir, you fool. If I had that many elixirs, would I give them to you? Then Enhak Thien asked whether he knew why he taught martial arts to them. It was because they had bodies perfectly suited to learn the golden blood form. It turned out the blood circulation of those two is faster than ordinary people, giving them the ability to manifest inner power quickly. But if their blood flowed too fast when manifesting the blood form, they could not control their inner energy. The vessels would overstrain, the body would rage, and they would die. If he had not intervened, they would be dead, and the elixir pills only helped control the blood flow speed. Enhak Thien continued to explain about the weapon. How dare you speak so when you do not even know the sword you hold? The air seemed to freeze. He said that though the sword was old, it contained cold steel inside, an ancient sword superior to others. Thien Nam was very pleased because finally he heard a sensible remark. However, Enhak Thien also saw Van Hai at a disadvantage, because this match had been arranged for Toa Bak to win. Nevertheless, Van Hai still turned the tide against his expectation. The match being undecided caused Enhak Thien to cancel his earlier commitment. Van Hai said sadly, in the end I am still just your pawn. Yet Enhak Thien said that based on this duel he decided to accept him as a disciple. It would be a waste to discard a potential like him. Some people are regarded as martial geniuses. Such people learn 10 from 1, they are hard to find, and you are such a person. Enhak Thien had decided thus, and Van Hai felt he considered his talent innate. Thien Nam encouraged him that it was his talent. Tiu Dam also told him not to belittle himself. Van Hai was deeply moved and thanked them, but it was still too early. He had to ask one more thing. So Van Hai asked directly, even if I become your disciple, I still cannot learn the golden blood form, right? You said it can only be learned by those whose blood circulates fast. Enhak Thien smiled and told him he should be grateful, because he did not teach him that but helped him perfect the sword art. He gravely asked further, do you know what you learned belonged to the one who was once the overlord of Yan'an, my enemy? Van Hai feigned shock as if struck. Those bragging words made Thien Nam puzzled. He suspiciously asked, didn't I already tell you? Tiu Dam explained that he was acting. Because it was the first time he heard it, so he had to react that way. She told him to get used to it because that's called playing dumb. Enhak Thien was telling him he was the one who knew the most about the refined sword art after the death of Thien Nam's swordsman, and he was the one who helped Van Hai perfect it. Van Hai felt it unnecessary since Thien Nam had taught him, but then he mentioned repairing the Danshan. Seeing him confused, both sword spirits seemed to encourage him to seize the opportunity. Then Van Hai respectfully spoke. Disciple Chiu Van Hai pays respects to master. It seemed his fate had greatly changed after that sentence. At that time, Toa Bak hesitantly addressed Elder Man Demon Enhak Thien. It turned out he was referring to his and his brother. Enhak Thien magnanimously replied, although the two of you are clumsy, I cannot drive away those who have learned my martial arts. I do not much like that. But I will also accept both of you as disciples. Toa Bak quickly pressed his brother's head down, and together they kowtowed to him. However, Vu Haiyan was somewhat puzzled about naming conventions, so he was a bit annoyed. Then something unexpected occurred. Congratulations, junior brother. I cannot believe I have 2 junior disciples so quickly. Unbelievable. The quarrel over who is senior brother made him grin. Then Enhak Thien's laughter rang out. He asked about a person, Tong Dai, did you see? The successor of your martial art has become my disciple, so consider me the winner." While he was stunned, Thien Nam disdainfully said that if he became Nhak Thien's disciple, then he would not help him. The cold ice on the mountain had witnessed everything. The waterfall still flowed. Entering inside, Nhak Thien asked, "Are you well? I finally surpassed you." Suddenly he frowned, except for one thing. "Tong Dai, tell me." The deceased of course did not respond. He continued to ask, "Who dared raise a hand to kill you?" "A hand to kill you."